Well, hello, lovely, lovely, lovely people. I am thrilled to be back. I haven't posted content in about a week because I was in London, England. I was across the pond. I was having a little break. And I gotta be honest, I actually did anticipating posting more content than I actually did anticipate posting content. That was the plan. And then I got there and I realized how actually little time I had there because there's just so much to do. And there was so much I wanted to see. And even though I got stood up by an awful, awful, awful boy who did not realize and had no gratitude for the opportunities in which he had been given, I still made the best of it. And so I had a great trip to London. I also kind of realized how burnt out I was, to be honest. And so I decided to take a little break. But I'm back now. I flew back yesterday. I got home in time for Thanksgiving dinner. DW assumed that YouTube banned me. No, YouTube did not ban me. I just took myself out of commission for a week because I was burnt out and I needed to rest. But the good news is that while I was in London, I saw a lot of really cool things and I came back pretty inspired on a direction for something that I thought was going to go in one direction and now I'm thinking about it in a completely new way, and that's kind of what happens when we travel, isn't it? Is we can take inspiration from what we experience. And I got to be honest too, like it was really nice. There were no mask Nazis. I wasn't asked for my vaccine paperwork once. Not once in the whole trip. I even got to go to Stonehenge. That was pretty rad. But guys, I'm super thrilled to be back here for a happy hour on this Friday after Thanksgiving. I don't know how many of you guys have the day off today. I know my husband's working. He's downstairs. He's like, Carlin, I'm not giving up that time and a half. Like, smart, Victor. Like, what else were we gonna do? But how many of you have the day off today? I kind of have been taking it easy. I did get some stuff done earlier, but that was pretty nice. Nathan says, "Thank you for being a great leader and luminary, Carlin." I wouldn't say I'm a luminary, but I do try to do my very best, and that's what we do. Kurt's off. Congratulations, Kurt. That's what we try to do on Happy Hour. Is the whole point of Happy Hour is to basically make sure that we know what we're up against when we're talking about the woke left. What we do in happy hour is we watch woke trainings or presentations. We watch them start to finish. We don't just clip out the highlights. We actually watch what they're saying. We try to process what they're saying, understand what they're saying, so that we can be in the best position possible to fight back against the insanity that is going on in the world today. Today, we have two things we're going to watch, actually. We have two things that we are going to watch. Let me show you what they are. And the reason I chose two things is honestly, I really wanted to watch this first one, and it was just too short for a full happy hour. So this is the first one I found. This is, did anyone ever watch Democracy Now? I did. I did back in the day. I haven't in years, but I used to watch this. Democracy Now is like an uber, uber, uber progressive show. And so I found this one that was just from a couple of days ago, from November 23rd, 2020. Nikole Hannah-Jones on the 1619 Project teaching critical race theory and white supremacy on trial. Amid a right-wing attack on teaching critical race theory, we speak in depth with Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Nikole Hannah-Jones, creator of the New York Times Magazine 1619 Project, which reframes U.S. history by marking the year when the first enslaved Africans arrived on the Virginia soil as the foundational date for the United States. The project launched in 2019 and has been expanded into an anthology of 18 essays, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, this is a full interview with Nikole Hannah-Jones, and I just really wanted to watch it. But the problem is, it was only 35 minutes, and usually happy hour stuff, it's like over an hour. So I was like, okay, I got to find something else. So we're going to watch that. And then what we're going to watch is this, a perfect companion piece. Now, this is from back in February 2021, teaching the 1619 Project. Huh, isn't that funny? Because I've been assured on several different occasions now that critical race theory is not taught in schools, and yet here we have an entire presentation with with a whole bunch of teachers, director of social studies for DC public schools. We've got an English and social studies teacher from a high school in Chicago. We've got this guy from Buffalo public schools. We've got this an 8th grade social studies teacher, 8th grade, another high school teacher here. Join the Pulitzer Center for a conversation with educators who have been implementing the 1619 project in their classrooms and school districts. So, we're going to watch this to learn exactly what they're doing to teach the 1619 project. Now, what they're probably going to say is, well, Harlan, the 1619 project is not critical race theory. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. 100% every single day. I mean, we're going to watch, listen, we're going to watch Nikole Hannah-Jones. That's not Nikole Hannah-Jones. Let's get Nikole Hannah-Jones herself right there. We're going to watch Nikole Hannah-Jones herself explain the 1619 project and talk about it from just 3 days ago. And then we're going to go back to February before they started using the line, well, critical race theory just isn't taught in schools. And we're going to watch a group of teachers explain exactly how they're teaching critical race theory in schools. So we got a two for today. Is everyone ready? Is everyone excited? I'm excited. I'm excited. But because this is happy hour, we do have a couple of orders of business to take care of first. Number one, I have to have a drink here. Oh my goodness. Hang on one sec. Okay. I have like leftover wine from Thanksgiving. My husband tried to get me drunk last night. Didn't really work out for him because I was really tired. But I have a lot of leftover wine, so I'm going to start with this leftover glass of Prosecco. And then if I happen to run out of that, I have this bottle of wine, which I literally only bought because I thought the bottle was pretty. Look at the bottom of the bottle. It's a rose. I have no idea how good this wine is. I usually don't like rosé, but again, I thought the bottle was really pretty. So that's what I've got for happy hour. If you guys are drinking today, let us know what you were drinking in the chat. And let's see. What else do we have? Oh, Unwoke Bingo. Of course, if you guys want to download your Unwoke Bingo card, it is in the description, whether you are watching on YouTube on my first channel, on my second channel, Actively Unwoke, which we'll talk about more in a sec, whether you're watching on Odyssey, whether you're watching on Rockfin, or whether you're even watching on Facebook. It is in the description for the video. You can generate your Unwoke Bingo card. Every bingo card is different. Just listen for the terms, listen for the words. Sometimes I even give away freebies during the presentation. We're going for a line or we're going for corners. If you get a bingo, just make sure you chat in that you got a bingo. You don't win a dang thing, but it keeps us sharp. Make sure we're paying attention. A little bit of fun, bragging rights. Oh, Eric's drinking sake. I love sake. I do. I actually have a little sake downstairs, but it's like this big. And I was like, that's not enough for happy hour. Once we get a regular bingo, we are going for blackout bingo. Now, no single person has gotten blackout bingo yet. We'll see how it goes today. But that's something we can do just to pass the time to help keep us sharp. It's a fun little game if you want to participate in that. And of course, yes, John says, who doesn't love Unwoke Bingo? I mean, and doesn't it say a lot that I've listened to so many of these presentations that I know exactly the words they're going to use? Which is how we created Unwoke Bingo in the first place. Oh, we've got some people drinking today. Oh, we got Captain Morgan. Got some rye whiskey. Got some hard cider. I actually drank quite a bit of hard cider in London. Beer sucks in England. I'm sorry. Beer sucks in England. So I drank cider. The only, like, it was just so disappointing. That was disappointing. The fish and chips, though, were awesome. Can I say that? Like, I never thought fish and chips could be that good. I was pretty happy with that. Space Monkeys bring Bloodlight Platinum. You know, may the odds be ever in your favor, Space Monkey. All right, guys. Last thing we're going to talk about before we get started is you can really help me out by joining my locals. Now, because it is Black Friday, here's the thing. Because it is Black Friday, I have a special locals deal. Locals is the thing that makes it possible for me to do this. Locals is the thing that makes it possible for me to spend my time looking into this stuff, to do my very best to explain it to you guys, to do all of the things that I'm doing, because YouTube don't pay the bills. To be quite frank, it doesn't. YouTube has cordoned off my channel so that I can't grow my audience. Like, my audience hasn't grown in over a year. And actually that's because 90% of the people who watch my videos are subscribed already to my YouTube channel. That means YouTube is not even showing my videos to people who are not subscribed to my channel. So fun times for me. So the best way that I have to combat that and to make sure that I have the ability to do what I'm doing is with my locals community. Now, locals is free to join. It is free. We'll even put the ticker across the bottom. It is free to join. You can join at kb.locals.com. But if you want to support the work I'm doing and help me out and help me stay independent, the very best thing you can do is become a supporter on my locals. Now, you can become a supporter at $5 a month. You can become a supporter at $50 a year, which gives you 2 months for free. You can make a one-time gift. But for right now, up until Sunday, I have a special Black Friday deal where if you go and click on this monthly option and you go to the promo code and you put in Friday, you will get a free month in my local. So there's really no excuse, guys. If you've been waiting, if you've been, figuring out, maybe Carlin's Locals is cool, maybe not. I don't think it's worth $5 a month. Like, now's the time that you can check it out. Okay, you can check it out. You can see the perks. You can come to the Zoom calls. You can participate in the discussions. You can meet other people in the community. You get a whole month to do it. But you got to use the code Friday before Sunday. I know it's a little confusing. I'm going to keep the Black Friday deal running through Sunday. So it's pinned to the top of the chat on the YouTube channels. If you're watching on another channel, definitely just go to kb.locals.com/support and put in that promo code and you can get a free month to check it out. I happen to think that my locals community is like the best community on all of locals. We do 2 Zoom calls every single week. We are doing book club. We're reading Woke Inc. We do craft and bitches. We do all sorts of stuff together. So come and join us. It is my own little bastion of sanity, and it really does help support the work I'm doing. Muhammad says, lemon or lime juice can rescue even the bottom shelf crap I am drinking today. Russian sounding name, distilled in Kentucky, type of dealio. Well, best of luck to you, Muhammad. All right, guys, let's dig in and let's get started. The first thing we're going to watch is that Democracy Now! Interview. Let me just get everything set up here. Just takes a second. Share. Oh my God. Okay, share audio. I think I'm doing this right. Bing. All right, guys, as always, let me know if the sound is wonky or anything. I'll do my best to try to level it out. Let's get started.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York with Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Well, we begin today's show with Nikole Hannah-Jones, the Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter who covers racial injustice for the New York Times Magazine. She's the creator of the landmark 1619 Project, which reframes U.S. history by marking the year 1619, when the first enslaved Africans arrived on Virginia soil as the country's foundational date. This month, 2 new books that she co-edited are out: The 1619 Project, a new origin story, and an adaptation for children titled Born on the Water.
I'm sorry. Hang on. She wrote an adaptation for children? This is like the grift that keeps on giving. I swear to God.
100th anniversary of the first enslaved Africans landing in colonial Virginia in 1619, that the New York Times Magazine launched the 1619 Project as a special issue in 2019. It's now been expanded as an anthology of 18 essays, along with poems and short stories that examine the legacy of slavery, dedicated to the more than 30 million descendants of American slavery. Many argue the 1619 Project has changed how history is taught and discussed in the United States. Just last year, then President Donald Trump announced his proposed 1776 Commission at the National Archives Museum in Washington, D.C. last year in direct response to the 1619 Project.
Critical race theory.
Wait. Are they admitting off the bat that the 1619 Project is critical race theory? That's an interesting development, isn't it, considering they're saying it's not taught in schools?
1619 Project and the crusade against American history is toxic propaganda, ideological poison that, if not removed, will dissolve the civic bonds that tie us together, will destroy our country. That is why I recently banned trainings in this prejudiced ideology from the federal government and
Okay, so one of the things that we should definitely be listening for in this interview then is, does Nikole Hannah-Jones at any point in this interview try to make the distinction between the 1619 Project and critical race theory? Is she going to accept the premise that these are the same thing, or is she going to reject the premise that these are the same thing? Okay? That's one thing we want to pay attention to.
banned it in the strongest manner possible.
Many states have banned the teaching of the 1619 Project as part of the right-wing attacks on critical race theory.
No, that's not true. That's not true. Not a single state has banned. I don't believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think there were some states that were actually trying to move on this, but I don't think that any state has banned the teaching of the 1619 Project specifically. Now they may have banned tenets from the 1619 Project, but I don't think they ever banned it specifically. And if they haven't banned it specifically, this is just another example of the fact that these two things, that the left views, remember, this is an uber progressive show. So if they are saying that the anti-CRT laws are banning the 1619 Project, that's just an admission on their part that those two things are one and the same, which of course I believe they are. But I've also been told for the last year the critical race theory is not being taught in schools. And so if we are watching a panel of educators right after this about the 1619 Project being taught in schools, that's fundamentally antithetical to the idea that it's not being taught if they accept that both those things are the same. Oh, Catherine Scully, who's been a member of my channel for 11 months. I'm so sorry, Catherine. I can't show your chat on the screen because it's not integrated with StreamYard yet, but I do see it. Catherine says CRT either doesn't exist or it is Black history, depending on what is convenient. Yeah, Catherine, that's exactly right. And thank you so much for being a member of my channel for the last 11 months. I greatly appreciate the support.
In schools. Earlier this year, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where Nikole Hannah-Jones went to graduate school, initially denied her tenure, even after it was unanimously approved by the faculty. The board typically rubber stamps tenure for professors who win such approval from their peers, and it reversed the decision after protests from alumni, faculty, and students, and ultimately offered Nikole Hannah-Jones tenure. But she declined, instead announced she would join the faculty at Howard University, one of the country's most prestigious historically Black universities, and help launch the Center for Journalism and Democracy. Tonight, Nikole Hannah-Jones will visit her high school alma mater in Waterloo, Iowa, where she'll talk about her 2 new books with her former teacher, Reverend Ray Dial, who is the teacher who first introduced her to the date 1619 as the year a ship-carrying enslaved people first arrived in what's now the United States. She writes that when she first read the date, it appeared to be glowing 3-dimensional numbers rising from the page as an exhilarating revelation started to sink in. Nikole Hannah-Jones, welcome back to Democracy Now! Congratulations on your new books as you join us from Des Moines on your way to Waterloo. Can you talk about that moment in high school? What a difference a high school teacher makes.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. Mr. Ray Dow is the teacher who changed my life. He's the teacher who both introduced me to how vast Black history was, even though we hadn't been taught hardly any of it. And he's also the teacher who introduced me.
Wait. You can't have it both ways. You can't say my high school teacher taught me about what Black history really was, and then at the same time say we didn't learn Black history in high school. You can't say those two things together. Either you learned it in high school or you did not learn it in high school. And listen, I have no issue with this stuff being taught in high school. I have no issue with it at all. I have no issue with real history being taught in high school. What I have an issue with is the rewriting of history, which is what the 1619 Project has done, which they've already admitted to. The New York Times admitted to this.
Or suggested that I join my high school newspaper and write the stories that I wanted to see. So I opened the preface for the new 16.
So you mean that she went to such a systemically racist high school in Iowa, which is pretty white to begin with, and she was allowed to write for her school newspaper? Oh, isn't that funny?
19 book with that because that was a transformative moment for me. I had no idea that Black Americans had been here this long, that we had a lineage that went back almost as long as the English people who got all the credit for it. And that number stood in to me for an erasure and really made me understand as a young, 15 or 16-year-old that the history we're taught is not necessarily what's the most important things or all there is to know, but it's what someone has determined that we should know, and that there's so much more out there, particularly if you're members of marginalized communities, that never gets into the histories we tell ourselves. And that erasure is very powerful.
Could you talk about the 1690 project itself? It's comprised of 18 essays and 36 poems and works of fiction. Talk about your decision to use this format to tell the story.
Yes. So the 1619 Project, A New Origin Story, the book, is an expanded version of the original project that published in August of 2019. So all of the original essays that were in that first project have all been significantly expanded. And then we've added 8 additional essays written by a range of some of the nation's most renowned historians, from Dr. Carol Anderson to Martha Jones to Dr. Dorothy Roberts, Dr. Martha Jones, sorry. And they're covering a range of subject areas such as Indian removal and settler colonialism, citizenship, the creation of race, the Second Amendment.
The creation of race.
And so it's really
the creation of race. Does anyone know what she means by the creation of race? Pop quiz for the chat. Does anyone know what Nikole Hannah-Jones means when she says the creation of race in conjunction with the 1619 Project? All right, here's what she means. I know there's a little delay, so I'm going to spill the beans, and then we'll see who got it right. So what she means is that critical race theorists essentially believe that that race is a social construct. Okay, they don't believe it's like a real thing. They believe, yeah, and M169 is starting to get it. She thinks race is a social construct, right? And what they believe is that race was created in America. That race is an American creation because up until America, there was no such thing as the white race. Okay, there was English and Irish and German and all of these things, but no one considered themselves to be white. They didn't consider themselves to be white until America, and they didn't consider themselves to, and the reason they considered themselves to be white in America was to separate themselves from people who were Black, so that they were building power structures to support white people in order to keep Black people down. That's what she means when she says the creation of race. They literally don't believe that race was a thing until America. Nick H says she admitted 1619, not facts, but her interpretation. Yeah, exactly. Which is history. I mean, that is history, right? There are different ways to interpret history, and we do have to allow for that. But that doesn't mean that, that doesn't mean that the 1619 Project should be taught in schools as historical fact when it is simply an interpretation. And part of the problem with this being implemented in schools is that people are not allowed to dissent. They're not allowed to ask questions, things like that.
Giving an even broader understanding of how the legacy of slavery shapes our modern society. And then in addition to that, we've also doubled the poetry and short fiction that was in the original project in what we call a literary timeline. So we ask some of the great American writers to reimagine all of these periods in American history involving Black people and race, and to write them from a Black perspective. And it's actually one of the most profound and powerful parts of the book. And then the third aspect of the book are these archival photos that launch every essay.
I just want to make a note at the beginning while we're getting kind of like through the boring part of this interview, I think. Many of you are watching on my second YouTube channel, Actively Unwoke. I see M169 over there. I see Janice over there. I see Common Gay View over there. I just want to note that I am broadcasting this simultaneously on both of my YouTube channels. However, starting in January, just 1 month, Happy Hour is going to move over to Actively Unwoke, which is my second YouTube channel. It will still be on Odyssey. It will still be on Rockfin, in the same place. But if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to want to make sure you subscribe to my second YouTube channel, Actively Unwoke. The link is in the description. It's youtube.com/Actively Unwoke. And that will be the exclusive home of Happy Hour in the new year. So I've been doing this thing where I've been putting it on both for the meantime, but I am going to be moving it exclusively there in the new year. So make sure you subscribe, please.
So the photos are of regular Black people, not famous people, through time, from the beginning of photography all the way until, a couple years ago. And it's a way of forcing the reader to pause and consider the humanity of these 31 million descendants of American slavery, to really focus that everything that you're going to read about, all of the brutality, all of the horrors, all the violence, but also all of the resilience, all the love, happened to real people. So I think that the format is it's beautiful and it's powerful.
I have no issue with again, I want to emphasize this. I have no issue with slavery being taught. I think it should be taught. I have no issue with looking at the tougher parts of our history. I have no issue with thinking about the implications of slavery. And I do still think there are implications today that we should be able to have conversations about. Where I start to have an issue is when this stuff gets asserted as the only perspective that someone is allowed to have, and no one is allowed to dissent, and no one is allowed to ask questions. And if you ask questions, you're considered a racist and a horrible person. That's what I have an issue with. Scott, I assure you that if you look up Actively, I don't know why the link's not working. It does for most people, but I assure you that if you just look up Actively Unwoke on YouTube, I'm live on it right now, so I know it works.
And people I hope will get a great deal from it.
And at the core of the book is an attempt, obviously, to link the past to the present. Could you talk about how we continue to see the legacy of slavery in current U.S. institutions, whether it's the government itself, the education, housing?
Absolutely. So the entire premise of the 1619 Project is that the legacy of slavery was not banished along with the institution of slavery in 1865. That slavery is one of the oldest institutions in our society. The English settled Jamestown in 1607. And by 1619, just 12 years later, they're engaging in African slavery. So that is 150 years before they even decide that they want to become their own country. And that slavery shaped everything, nearly everything about the country that would ultimately be established. So, for instance, we have an essay on citizenship, which talks about the 14th Amendment.
Them having slavery shaped everything about the country. I don't think you can actually make that argument, considering that half the country did not engage in slavery. It is a disingenuous argument to say that slavery shaped every single thing about the country when half of the country did not participate in slavery. Now, I'm not going to make the argument that there was no impact. I think that there was an impact. I think there are very valid conversations we can have, but it is disingenuous at best to say that it is the entire thing that shaped the country for what it is. TPS says, because pale-skinned people have no empathy and never knew darker-skinned people were human. Sarcasm, who's racist? Yeah, and also, I mean, this is a really good point, too, that Eric's making. Like, slavery is actually older than America. Slavery didn't start in America. Slavery is still going on today.
And how the reason that we have birthright citizenship in the United States, where every person born on this soil is an automatic citizenship, is because Black Americans generationally were not citizens of this country, even though they were born here. And after the end of slavery, they pushed very hard for a constitutional amendment that would guarantee them citizenship and all people born on the soil citizenship.
Wait. So your argument is that the reason that we have birthright citizenship in this country is because of Black people, when America is a systemically racist country? That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Black people, I'm sorry, like, it makes no sense. We're talking about a small percentage of the population. There is, I don't know the history here specifically. I'm not going to argue that there was like no impact, but I have a really hard time believing that it was the work of former slaves that resulted in birthright citizenship in the country. I have a really hard time believing that argument, considering the overall percentage of the population, and particularly when she would also make the argument that America's a systemically racist country. Like, if anyone in the chat can educate me about the history, fine. I would appreciate that, but I have a really, really hard time believing that.
Thank Black Americans for that. It talks about the creation of race and how these ideas of an inherent race and that one race is superior to another, and the fact that every single form that we have for the government, we have to choose a race, including our birth certificate, our marriage certificate, our death certificate, that is also a
I would be completely in favor of getting rid of the checkbox or like the freaking drop down with 87,000 races in it. If Nikole Hannah-Jones has an issue with the fact that we have to fill out race on government forms, we have alignment here. I don't think I should have to do that. I don't think you should have to do that. I'm completely in favor of getting rid of it. Everyone in favor, say aye in the chat. If you're in favor of getting rid of race on government forms, I think that is an excellent area in which we can find common ground, Nikole Hannah-Jones.
Legacy of 1619. We have an article that talks about the Second Amendment. That's by Dr. Carol Anderson out of Emory, and really argues that our obsession with guns. We have more guns than almost any society in the world, and we have the highest rates of gun violence. And that is also a legacy of slavery, that the Second Amendment, while we like to think of it as being allowing citizens to form militias to ward off government tyranny, it also was allowing them to form militias to suppress slave rebellions.
You know, I saw an article today, I think it was in the New York Post, about how Black gun ownership is going through the roof. So Black people seem to be taking advantage of the Second Amendment, and I do wonder if Nikole Hannah-Jones has comment on that. Because they're like, the Black people are like apparently okay with the fact that they can own guns legally. When Nikole Hannah-Jones like to take away the ability of Black people to defend themselves by owning guns, is that what she's arguing? Or is that just for white people that shouldn't get Second Amendment protection?
Because enslaved people.
By the way, can I just tell you guys? So I overheard when I was at a bar in London. And I overheard these two British kids talking about the Kyle Rittenhouse case, and they could not wrap their head around the fact that Americans are allowed to buy to own guns. They were really having a tough time with this, and it made me so grateful that I was thinking, I was sitting there, I'm like, I'm gonna let Victor buy another gun when I get home. This is ridiculous. Let's see. Is it convenient that race was a thing in Roman times? Pope Gregory in the 6th century witnessed blonde hair, blue-eyed boys awaiting sale in Rome. Yeah, I mean, they don't like to talk about this stuff. David says on Facebook, I bet she owns a gun. I bet you she does too. Does Nikole Hannah-Jones want to give up her guns?
We're constantly rebelling. And it looks at why someone like Philando Castile in Minneapolis, who is a legal gun carrier, can be killed for carrying a gun, and whether or not Black people really do have a right to bear arms in this nation. So every single essay in the book really makes this modern connections. And what we hope is slavery has influenced our society in so many ways, but we've really invisibilized that. We've lost that connection and understanding. And what I argue for the project is the narrative of 1776 does not explain the insurrection on the Capitol in January. It doesn't explain George Floyd and why a white police officer could feel that he could kill a man in front of witnesses and would not have to worry about facing any consequences. And it certainly doesn't explain why we have a political party right now that is trying to instate minority rule. That is the legacy of 1619.
Nikole.
That's the whole premise of the way the freaking government was established, Nikole. Minority rule? What are you even talking about? Our whole system of government was established specifically to prevent tyranny of the majority. You want to talk about history? Our whole system of government was established specifically to prevent the tyranny of the majority. They're working within the system to try to make sure they're doing what they can do so you guys don't go off the goddamn rails. God, we've got a year left. We have 1 year left until the midterms. We have 1 year left until maybe some semblance of balance can be restored back into this thing. And you guys know how I feel about the Republicans. I think the Republicans deserve to lose, but I frankly think that even with the Republicans probably shooting themselves in the foot many times before the next election, it's probably going to be okay. I think they're going to retake the House. So hopefully, knock on wood. I'm knocking on wood right now. Even though I think the GOP deserves to lose, they're the only hope we have.
Oh, your work has become the target of right-wing backlash. Last year, the Trump administration threatened to pull federal funding from schools that use the 1619 Project in their curriculum. Tennessee's Education Commissioner, Penny Schwinn, recently signed an emergency measure to regulate the topic of race and gender in classrooms that includes financial penalties for educators who violate the law. This is after Tennessee's Republican governor signed a law prohibiting critical race theory from being taught in the state's schools. And then you've got other states, including North Dakota, Tennessee, Florida, Idaho, and Texas that have passed similar laws. I want to play a clip of Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott signing into law the 1836 Project earlier this year. The name is a reference to the 1619 Project and marks the year Texas seceded from Mexico.
I just want to say before we listen to this clip, like, Texas has screwed up on this issue 19 times from Sunday. They really have. Their anti-CRT bill is kind of insane and goes way beyond the bounds of what I think they should be regulating. And I think that this is one of those things where the GOP doesn't do themselves any favors. But let's listen to what Greg Abbott has to say. Fine.
The 1836 Project promotes patriotic education about Texas and ensures that the generations to come understand Texas values.
Now, you and others responded to the announcement of the 1836 Project by highlighting the fact that Texas had fully legalized slavery in its constitution and was guilty at the time of lynching Black and Mexican Texans. If you could talk about this movement around the country, what it means for history of the United States and for what children and everyone learns.
Yes. So one, I think it's quite revealing that the argument is if we teach a truer history that actually reflects the facts of what happened.
So right now, she's either going to do one of two things. Again, I said this at the top, but just for any new people who've joined, Nikole Hannah-Jones is going to do one or two things. She's going to inextricably link the 1619 Project to critical race theory, or she's going to separate the two. Okay? There's no middle ground here. Either the 1619 Project is critical race theory based on this interview that she did 3 days ago, or it is not critical race theory, in which case she should have the opportunity to say that. So let's listen to the position she takes. And again, I don't know. I'm watching this for the first time, so I don't know.
That will raise children not to love their country. I think that says a great deal about what we actually think about how much this country has lived up to the idea of exceptionalism. If a patriotism has to be based on propaganda that really diminishes and tries to erase from memory the difficult parts of our past, it doesn't seem like that is a genuine patriotism. But I think that we should all, as Americans, be deeply concerned about these anti-history laws, because what they're really attempting to do is control our memory and to control our understanding of our country. When Texas succeeded in 1836,
this is a classic example of the ironclad law of woke projection, which is the woke will always tell you, will always say that you're doing the thing that they themselves are doing. When she's saying that this is trying to control people's minds, it's trying to erase history, that's exactly what the 1619 Project is intending to do. That's exactly what they're doing. And so anytime someone like this tells you, this is what my political opponents are doing, you always have to assume they are projecting what they are doing onto their political opponents as a way to deflect from what they're trying to do.
It succeeded in order to form a slaveholding republic. If you don't teach that, then children are not able to understand all of the inequality that they have today. Timothy Snyder, the historian, is a historian who studies authoritarianism. And he talks about how these memory laws that we're seeing being passed all across the country, including in my home state of Iowa, where I am right now, where first they tried to pass an anti-1619.
Memory laws. Listen to how they're positioning. What they're talking about are the anti-CRT bills. That's what they're talking about. They're calling them anti-history laws. They're calling them anti-memory laws. It's like 1984 in action.
Project law, which failed, and then they came back and successfully passed an anti-critical race theory law, which has educators in the state that launched my career, where I was educated, afraid to teach the work that I have done. What they do is when you start to see.
So, Nikole, are you saying that the 1619 Project would violate the anti-CRT bill in Iowa? Is that what we're saying? Because if it doesn't violate the anti-CRT bill in Iowa, there would be no problem with teaching it. Are you insinuating that teaching the 1619 Project would violate the anti-CRT bill that got signed into law in Iowa?
These memory laws, you start to see nations that are veering towards authoritarianism, the idea of banning books, the idea that politicians will use the power of the state to prevent the teaching of ideas that they do not like. It's not incidental, Amy, and I know you know this, that the same states that are passing these anti-critical race theory laws are also passing laws to make it harder for citizens to vote. They're passing laws that actually pull back on democracy. They're passing laws that make it harder for women to choose their own reproductive health. All of these things are related, and whether
Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny that all the progressive ideas are interrelated? That's what you just said. Isn't it funny that they view every single progressive idea as related to each other? Because of course it is. Because the entire premise of what they're doing is not about race. It's not about gender. It's not about slavery. It's not about history. It's not about any of these things. They view everything as interrelated because they are fundamentally trying to destabilize the system and the values that the country was founded on. That's why everything is interrelated. Climate change, too. Let's throw that in there. Listen, one of the things that everyone in the chat needs to start wrapping their head around is that literally every single thing that's happening, whether it be vaccines or COVID or this new variant coming out of South Africa or abortion or critical race theory or any of in climate change, all of these things, every single one of these things is interrelated. The minute that you start to understand that everything that they are doing is about attaining power and attaining control and being able to solidify their power, that's when you start to look at everything differently. And that's when you really start to see critical race theory is not about race. Critical race theory is about power. That is all that it is about at the end of the day. They're just using race as the weapon to attain more power. They're looking for ways to divide us. Because if they divide us, they win.
You love or hate the 1619 Project, we should not be accepting a society where the state has the power to control what texts we learn from and what ideas we can understand, and more importantly, how we understand the truth about our country.
Nikole, when you won the Pulitzer Prize for commentary for your introductory essay to the 1619 Project last year, you wrote, quote, "Ida B. Wells and I were awarded the Pulitzer on the same day. How can I not believe that the ancestors intervened on this moment? I will sit in the truth of how they cleared a path for me, how they endured so that I and the 1619 Project could be." Of course, Ida B. Wells was formerly enslaved and went on to be a crusading anti-lynching journalist. She received a special posthumous Pulitzer citation for her outstanding and courageous reporting. You're co-founder of the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting. Can you talk about her pioneering role and what this meant to receive the Pulitzer on the same day so many years later?
Absolutely. I have long said and claimed Ida B. Wells Barnett as my spiritual godmother. She was honestly the first example of a Black woman doing the type of journalism that I wanted to do, which should tell you how undiverse or non-diverse the field of investigative reporting is. That I didn't actually know living examples of Black women investigative reporters when I was young. So she was a pioneering investigative journalist who really brought the scourge of lynching to a global audience. She would go into towns where a Black man or woman had just been lynched, and she would interview people and she would document. And she was actually one of the early data reporters, because she started to collect data on how many lynchings were occurring, what were the reasons given for those lynchings, and then what did her reporting show. She also was a true intersectional woman. She was a suffragist.
Intersectionality. Bingo
And had to
word.
fight both for women's rights to vote and against the racism within the suffragist movement. She was a civil rights activist. She was a co-founder of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, where she had to fight against gender discrimination as a Black woman. And so in so many ways, she was just this pioneer.
If she was a co-founder of the organization, then why was she fighting against discrimination in the organization she co-founded? Listen, I'm not going to say that I'm not going to say it was easy. I'm not. And I actually have like full admiration and respect for things that Ida B. Wells did. I really do. But again, it's just like the things these people say and the assertions they make no logical sense. If you co-found an organization, you are the owner of that organization. Sorry. Yeah, Diane, this is really hard to watch, but that's why we have to watch it. To be honest, we need to watch this stuff, guys, because the thing is that when you turn on like Fox News or you look at your conservative influencers, the only thing you're going to get are like little tiny snippets of the most outlandish thing these people say. But the problem is with that is that most of the times the most outlandish things they say are not actually the most dangerous things they're saying. And this is why it is because of conservative influencers doing this. This is why there is a gross misunderstanding of what is going on. Too many people think this is about race. This is not about race. This is only about power. That's all it's about. And the only way we know that is by watching it and really thinking about it. We have to understand what's going on if we're going to fight back against it. Yeah, exactly. Reagan says everything serves as a distraction. If you aren't looking at what is actually going on, if you are trusting journalists and influencers to tell you what's going on, you will be forever fundamentally misinformed about what is going on in the world.
Pioneering woman who fought for civil rights and equal rights across many fronts. And she was a woman was largely reviled by white media. And I have in my Twitter bio that I'm a nasty, a slanderous and nasty-minded mulattress, because that's what the New York Times, where I work, called Ida B. Wells while she was engaging in her anti-lynching crusade. So I take great strength from knowing that the attacks on me and the attacks on my work are really just part of a lineage of what happens when Black women and Black women journalists dare to challenge power and challenge authority. So to receive the acknowledgement for this work about the Black experience on the same day that Ida B. Wells Barnett, who like so many Black journalists never received the acknowledgement that they deserved, was just deeply gratifying, because I do my work in service of them.
Nikole Hannah-Jones, I wanted to go back to your mention in the preface of your initial exposure to African-American history in a high school class with Mr. Ray Dial, and you're going to be talking with him this evening, how he initially exposed you to the history that had never been given to you previously. But this would have been sometime in the late 1980s. And I guess the fact that you had a class at all was no doubt due to the struggles of Black and brown people from the prior generation. I'm old enough to recall some of those struggles of the 60s and 70s, and particularly, for example, in 1977, that was when the ABC miniseries Roots played on national television based on Alex Haley's book. It premiered. It had record audiences across the country because back then there were basically the three television networks dominated all of television. It created a similar national debate over race to what the 1619 Project has done for this generation. But within a few years came the reactionary Reagan era, and capitalist America, as it has repeatedly throughout its history, began to rebury all those lessons. And so that another generation had to resurrect it, as you and others have done now in recent years. I'm wondering how you feel that this time will be different in terms of not.
I just want to point out, so Catherine in the chat says, I should watch Roots. I actually kind of feel like the same way, to be honest. I really do. I kind of feel the same way. Or even like things like 12 Years a Slave, which is a great movie. It is a great movie that does present, I mean, the truth about what happened in a way that's exceptionally uncomfortable to watch, but that is something that I think is valuable to watch. Those types of things are fundamentally different than the rewriting of history and teaching that history in school as though it's historical fact. There are ways in which we can grapple with the reality of the historical reality of slavery in this country, which I do think is something that people should learn about and be exposed to. Absolutely. I was taught about this in school. It wasn't even a thing. Like, it was like I started learning about this in school probably in middle school. I distinctly remember learning about it in 8th grade. So I'm fully in favor of this stuff being taught. I'm just not in favor of a rewriting of history being taught, which is generally what these people do. Yeah, Amistad. Oh, dude, Amistad's a great movie. Amistad is a great movie. 100%.
Reburying this history in another few years?
Well, first, let me correct the record. I'm not quite that old. I was in high school in the 90s, not the 80s.
90s, okay.
Okay. You know, it's a very sensitive subject when you get to be a woman my age. So I think that there are a couple of differences. I mean, well, one, let me say, clearly we are in a moment of backlash right now. So we know that there were the textbook wars in the 80s, that Reagan really tried to do some similar things to what we're seeing now, that there was a conservative backlash against the teaching of more inclusive and honest histories. And we're seeing that, you know, as we speak. This is what we're talking about. We're seeing a wave of laws, like actual laws across the country, that are trying to censor how we can talk about racial inequality and the history of racism, and really the histories of people who are not white in general. So I think we have to be very.
I just want to pause to say, for anyone who might be new, the anti-CRT bills do not actually censor the teaching of anything. Most, not all. Texas, I'm looking at you. Most, not all of the anti-CRT bills literally say that you can teach anything you want as long as you're teaching it objectively and you're not being a little activist in the classroom. So all this stuff can be taught. There's nothing preventing the teaching of any of this. That is a lie that these people are just repeating over and over and over and over and over again, so that people who have not taken the time to read the bills will be gullible enough to believe it.
Very concerned about the echo.
And if you have questions about that, go and read the bills. Go and read the bills that have passed. See if you actually have any problem with what is fundamentally presented in those bills
of history and what that means, because otherwise we just are going to have to keep relitigating this past again and again and see this kind of perpetual backsliding. I think the difference now, though, is we just have more democratic access to information. There aren't only 3 news stations anymore. There are all of these different modes where people are able to get out information and access information that they didn't have before. And I don't think, you know, I'm doing my work not from a small publication somewhere, but from the New York Times. And it's not going to be possible,
Such a systemically racist country that you're working for the New York Times and want to
powerful
pull a
people
surprise.
to completely erase the knowledge that folks are getting. In fact, you wouldn't be seeing all of these laws being passed if millions of Americans were not embracing this and wanting to learn more and really wanting to confront the truth of who we are.
Well, and specifically about this resurgence and greater attention now to anti-racism, it's occurring in corporate America, it's occurring in university campuses, specifically
Not occurring on university campuses,
a lot of university
please.
administrators and corporate leaders are increasingly talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. They even have a new acronym that they rolls off their lips, DEI. And there's all kinds of new research projects, foundation funds, plans to diversify staffs. And yet most of these institutions continue to.
So anytime you hear about diversifying staff, what that means is that they are using the color of someone's skin in order to make hiring decisions, which is fundamentally illegal in this country. It is not a legal thing to do to make hiring decisions based on the color of someone's skin. You're supposed to only make hiring decisions based on their ability to perform the job effectively. So let's just be clear about that. Anytime we're talking about making our workforce more inclusive, they are really talking about violating the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
To pursue exploitative connections to the mass of Black and brown communities around them. What, in your view, are the pitfalls of this current type of wokeness that we have to be vigilant against?
Okay, so if you follow me on Twitter at all, you know that I would never use the word wokeness. I think it is meaningless, and I think we should never be taking
They hate the term woke. They hate the term woke, which is why we all need to use it excessively every single day. There's a reason that my book that's coming out next year, that's in the description below, is called Actively Unwoke. There's a reason my second YouTube channel is called Actively Unwoke. These people hate the term woke, and there's been a little I don't know, rumblings, I suppose, in the anti-woke community lately about like we should stop using the term woke because it doesn't mean anything. No. We need to this is the time we need to double down on the use of the term woke because these people hate it. They hate it. They hate it. World Shrugger asks, like, why do they hate it? They hate it because we are successfully branding it as being bad. They were all about the term woke when it meant being awake, that you see the realities of the world. I'm woke. Remember they have like these t-shirts, these stickers, and all this merchandise and stuff. But the reason that they hate it is that we are being successful in branding it as being a bad thing. And so now they're trying to, woke is meaningless. I don't even know what you got. It's the same reason. It's the same reason that they're like, you don't even know what critical race theory means. Same reason. So if it's something bothers them, that's when you poke. You poke the bear. You keep poking in the injury. You poke and poke and poke and poke and poke because it pisses them off. And when they're pissed off, they make mistakes. Never, ever, 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 ever be afraid to really, like, if you find out they're pissed about something, you poke and poke and poke and poke and poke and poke and poke, and you try to provoke them because when they're provoked, they make mistakes. Poke the woke. Oh my God, that could be Eric. That could be interpreted in so many bad ways that I can't even talk about on YouTube because, you know, the rumors will start. But no, that could be interpreted in any number of ways. But generally, I agree. Guys, please mount that like button if you're enjoying this presentation. Please make sure you're subscribed on whatever platform you are watching on, whether it be my first YouTube channel, my second YouTube channel, Actively Unwoke, on Odyssey, on Rockfin, on Facebook. And please, as a reminder, make sure you join my locals, kb.locals.com. If you use the promo code Friday, you will be able to get a free month as a supporter of my locals. Check it out. Make sure it's a place you want to be. It's the best community on the internet. But definitely make sure you're subscribed. Let's keep going.
The language of conservative propagandists, which is what this wokeism is coming from. But what I'll say is,
I can confirm that I am not a lesbian. However, I am married. I've been happily married to a dude for the last 10 years. But I thank you for the compliment and, buy me a drink if you ever see me. That's all.
One thing that I do have in common with conservatives on this is I do think that DEI is generally not great, not for the reasons that they say. I just think it tends to be extremely superficial, that we don't actually see much transformation, that all of these corporations that last year with Black Lives Matter, all of these institutions, including Congress, who were saying that this was going to be a transformative moment, they did a lot of performance. So, DEI trainings and turning your square on Instagram Black, that's performance. If we look a year out, more than a year out, what types of structural change did we see at any of these institutions? And the answer is almost none. So I tend to not really be that interested in those trainings. I don't think that they're harmful like the right would have you think. And I don't think that they are, harming individuals or making individuals feel that they don't have a right to free speech. But I do think in general that they are ineffective and that many organizations use them as a shield against having to do the actual work.
Yes. We agree. Nikole, well, mostly we agree. I do actually believe that a lot of these trainings do inhibit the right to free speech, especially when they're performed by the government or when it's taught in schools. But we actually do agree. The DEI trainings are extremely ineffective. They've always been ineffective. They have never been, there is no evidence that these diversity trainings actually work. I don't know why we even bother. I've never quite understood it. And I say that as an actual organizational psychologist for anyone who wonders why I have the doctor in front of my name.
Nikole Hannah-Jones, you write about your dad in the introductory chapter. We started in Waterloo. Let's go there again. You talk in the end of the first chapter of the 1619 Project by saying, "We were told once by virtue of our bondage that we could never be American, but it was by virtue of our bondage that we became the most American of all." Can you talk about your father and your feelings about him flying the American flag outside your childhood home and what you came to understand?
Sure. So my dad was born on a cotton plantation into a sharecropping family in Greenwood, Mississippi. He was born in 1945 at a time when Black people had virtually no rights of citizenship in Mississippi. Mississippi was nearly a complete apartheid state. And he was a Black man who didn't get full rights of citizenship in this country until he had lived, into his 20s. So, and of course, the full rights of citizenship did not come with equality for my dad. So when I was a teenager, and my dad was a military veteran, Black people serve in the military at the highest rates of all racial groups. And he was very proud of his service. And he flew a flag in our front yard. The flagpole is probably 15 feet, but in my mind, it was 100 feet tall. And I didn't understand why this Black man who had lived the life that he lived would display his patriotism so outwardly. It seemed to me almost demeaning to do that, to show such outward pride in a country that had never treated him with basic dignity. So I worked through this in the essay on democracy, which is the opening essay for the book, which is really talking about the unparalleled role that Black Americans have played in democratizing this country, that Black people, through centuries of resistance, have worked to force this country up to its founding creed. And I came to understand that my dad's pride was not in that kind of performative flag pin wearing patriotism that says America is exceptional and America is the greatest nation in the world. But it was a pride in saying our ancestors built so much of what made this country prosperous. Our ancestors' blood is in this soil. Our ancestors have fought in every war this country has waged. And our ancestors are the reason we have the semblance of democracy that we have. And no one has the right to take that heritage from us. And it goes back to that line that you just read. Black people were not not given citizenship in this country until the passage of the 14th Amendment after the end of slavery. And we're not given rights of citizenship until the passage of the civil rights bills in the 1960s. And yet, because Black people were the only forced immigrants to this country, because of the Middle Passage, where we were forced to lose our language, our connection to a home country. You know, any other group who immigrates here, they can bring food from their country, clothes from their country. They can write back to family members. They can go back and visit. Black people had that completely erased, which means this is our country. And we are a product of the New World in a way that no other group of people are.
I mean, my ancestors come from France and Ireland, and I can't, like, I don't know who they are. Like, this is, not everyone has access to their entire flipping family tree. And again, I'm not going to pretend as though there aren't problems that were created by the entire establishment of slavery in the first place. I'm not going to pretend there aren't. But the fact of the matter is like, what do you want? What do you want to do about it? I can't write back to my ancestors in France and Ireland, or even the ones that founded Quebec, because I do know enough about my family tree to know about my ancestors founded Quebec. I have no idea who, like, I have no access to that. Like, what do you want, man? That's one of the realities of history, is that we lose connection with where we came from. I just don't know, like, here's what the real question is in my mind. What does she think the solution is? What is the solution? We can't go back and change what happened. All we can do is move forward. All we can do is move forward and try to make the reality that we are living in right now as good as it can be. We can't do anything about the past. If you're relitigating the past over and over and over again, I'm not saying deny it, I'm not saying ignore it, but if you're relitigating it over and over and over again, like, you're never going to get anywhere. There's never, like, for someone who probably is pretty effing progressive, it doesn't really seem like she cares about progress all that much, because if you're constantly looking into the past and be like, oh, this happened and then that happened, it's so horrible, you're never going to be able to move forward. And that's actually a good lesson for anyone, by the way, in life. Like, you can't change the past. The only thing you can do to move is to move forward. That's it. And so if you spend time dwelling in the past, and this thing happened that I didn't like, and that's how it impacted me this way, like, the only thing you can do is move forward. If you continually focus on the problems that have happened in the past, you have no hope of living a life without those problems.
And I wanted us to be able to claim the heritage of the land that we built.
And Nikole Hannah-Jones, you're a much decorated journalist, won the two Polks, the Pulitzer, the Peabody. Yet you've argued that the media are failing the country during a time when they're needed the most. Could you tell us how and why that is?
Yes, this program is called Democracy Now! And I think our democracy is in danger. If you are looking, the report that just came out yesterday that listed the United States as a democracy that is backsliding for the first time in the history of that list. If you look at the more than 150 scholars of democracy who have signed open letters saying that we are losing our democracy, is eroding. If you look at the fact that Republicans are passing laws to so intensely gerrymander in their favor that they can maintain power for decades without winning the majority of the vote. If you look at the wave of voter restriction laws that we haven't seen since Jim Crow, and yet the political reporting class, not all of them clearly, but too many of them are still reporting on this as if we are just engaged in normal horse race politics. They're trying to report with this view from nowhere that legitimizes a political party that actually is making it pretty clear that they don't believe in democracy. And I'm very concerned about that. As a Black journalist, as a journalist who comes from the tradition of journalism that couldn't pretend to be objective and couldn't pretend that all of our institutions will hold in the face of authoritarianism, I think that we are ill prepared for the moment that we're in. I think too many political reporters just have too much faith in our political systems, and there's no evidence to back up that faith. So I just hope that before it's too late, enough of us get an understanding that we can't cover what's happening in our country right now as politics as usual. And you can't dismiss all of these scholars of authoritarianism who are raising the alarm. We've got to do better. We know that reporting the press is the firewall of our democracy, and I don't think the firewall is holding right now.
As we wrap up, I wanted to ask you about this moment that you're talking about. You've got the inquiry into the riot, the insurrection of January 6th being led by a House panel. And you've got the 3 trials. The Rittenhouse trial that just wrapped up, not guilty on all counts.
Ooh, let's see what she says about that.
2 people and critically wounded a 3rd. You've got the Charlottesville white supremacy trial, and you've got that jury in Brunswick, Georgia now that's determining the fate of 3 white men, including a former police officer, a Georgia DA indicted for protecting him. But these 3 white men charged with hunting down and murdering 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery.
Found guilty.
So we're in the closing arguments now, and a nearly all-white panel of 12 jurors and 3 alternates are here.
Look how they were setting that up. Look how they were setting that up. They're all white. There can't possibly be justice. And then they all came, and then when the verdict came out, they were like, oh, well, you know, a guilty verdict is still not justice, and it's not good enough. Look how they were setting it up.
Hearing the rebuttal from prosecutors today. Yesterday, the defense attorney, Laura Hogue, who represents Greg McMichael, the former cop, blamed Arbery's own actions for his death. This is what she said.
Turning Ahmaud Arbery into a victim after the choices that he made does not reflect the reality of what brought Ahmaud Arbery to Satilla Shores. In his khaki shorts with no socks to cover his long, dirty toenails.
That drew a gasp from the courtroom.
I wasn't following that trial at all, but that's pretty effed up. I'm sorry. That's pretty effed up. And I strongly believe in everyone's right to have a strong defense. Everyone deserves a defense. That's part of the basis in our system. Like, you are not guilty until, like, you are proven to be guilty. But that right there, what we just watched, that was pretty messed up. I'm sorry. This is one of those places where I'm like, oh my God, you people make it so hard. Not you people in the chat and who are watching, the people that are the lawyer. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
Ahmaud's mother wanted.
They were all found guilty. What more do you want? And then they came out with all these statements like, justice is still not done. Yeah, their attorney sucked real bad.
Cooper Jones left the courtroom briefly. Can you comment on what she has said and what these trials are about?
You know, that was, even for someone who doesn't tend to get shocked by the way that Black Americans can be dehumanized in the legal system and in society at large. That was just a shocking moment. And what we're seeing, I mean, I really do hope that the viewers and listeners will get the 1619 book, because what we're seeing, it's laid out in that book. This idea that Black people are a separate and distinct group of humans who are inherently suspicious.
Dude, I used to follow Tom Hartman too.
Just
I did.
Their presence is a lethal weapon.
I did.
And so even if you have 3 men who are armed, who are chasing down an unarmed person, that's legitimate. The idea that random white citizens have the authority to stop and question a Black person, and if that Black person does not comply, they can use lethal force. That is a legacy of the slave patrols, which deputized all white Americans with the ability to question and stop and detain Black people and make sure that they were not in white spaces where they weren't supposed to be. All that we're seeing Charlottesville, the insurrection on the Capitol, George Floyd, the Rittenhouse trial, which of course goes to a long legacy of white people who fight for Black lives will receive the same poor justice that Black people receive. I think we have to decide if we are going to grapple honestly with our country or not. The kind of defining tension, the defining divide of American life begins in 1619 with the introduction of African slavery. Even our very democracy, the idea that we are the oldest continuing democracy in the world, was predicated on excluding Black people. It was predicated on a democracy that for the first 100 years, 200 years, was a democracy of white men. And now that we have a democracy that includes all kinds of people of color and women, our democracy is very frail. So I think that we are in scary times, and we are in times where it's going to require a great deal of courage on behalf of our fellow Americans. And I'm frankly just not seeing enough of it.
Well, Nikole Hannah-Jones, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter covering racial injustice for the New York Times.
Well, she is correct that I think this is a time that requires courage, and I think it requires courage of everyone, including everyone watching, because listen, let me make myself big. The only job that any of us really have is to tell the truth. That's it. The only job that any of us really have is to tell the truth. Nikole Hannah-Jones is not telling the truth right now. Let's be honest. She is making up history as she goes. Oh my God. Listen, like, if any of you question whether or not you can be successful in the world, just keep in mind that the woman that we just watched for the last hour and 16 minutes is a highly successful millionaire. Highly successful by our worldly standards. Millionaire. If you ever question your ability to have impact in the world, remember that the person that we just spent the last hour watching, who didn't really say anything of note, to be honest, she didn't. She's doing very well in the world. The biggest problem that most people have is they get in their own way. That is the biggest problem that the vast majority of people have. But, all right, let's move on, because I did promise a round 2 for today. A round 2. Because we are going to be watching now that we've watched the interview from 3 days ago with Nikole Hannah-Jones talking about the 1619 Project, let's just keep in mind that at no point in this interview did she say that the 1619 Project isn't critical race theory, we're something different. No, she didn't say that at any point. In fact, what she did was double down on the idea that the 1619 Project and critical race theory are inextricably linked. Because she was talking about all the anti-CRT bills that are impacting the 1619 Project. So now what we're going to do is we are going to watch a second presentation. We're going to watch a presentation of teachers teaching in K through 12 schools, talking about how they're teaching the 1619 Project. Because now that we've established that the 1619 Project is the same thing as critical race theory, which Nikole Hannah-Jones expertly established, we're going to talk about how the 1619 Project is being taught in schools from the mouths of actual educators. But before we get into that, guys, just a reminder, we are about an hour and 18 minutes into this presentation. We are not resetting bingo. No, keep your same bingo card. No resetting bingo. You can keep the same bingo card, okay? But if you're enjoying this so far, I do happy hour every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. I drink, we watch woke training, we talk about it, and we make fun of it, and we pick it apart, and we have a great old time in the chat. But this is going to be an extra bonus round for this week because that first interview is really short. Listen, if you're enjoying this training, please make sure you're training. God, it's not training. This is fun. This is like dessert. If you're enjoying this presentation, please make sure you subscribe to my channel. on whatever platform you're watching on, whether it be YouTube or Rockfin or Odyssey or Facebook. And please, of course, make sure you join my Locals community. You can join Locals for free at kb.locals.com, but as a special Black Friday deal, if you would like to join Locals as a supporter, which will unlock all the features of Locals, you can actually do that for free right now. Normally it's $5 a month or $50 a year, but if you do a monthly promo code called Friday, now till Sunday, so you've got the 26th, the 27th, and the 28th to do this. You got 3 days. You'll get a 1 month for free in my Locals. You can join our Zoom calls. You can join our book club. You can join our craft and bitch. You can join you can comment on everything. You can post stuff. You can do all sorts of stuff. And if you decide to stay on in my Locals community, you really help to support the work I do, which I greatly appreciate it. Locals is the thing that helps keep me independent, and it's the thing that makes it possible for me to do all this. And I would love to get 100 new supporters by the end of 2020. That's my goal. So there's never been a better time to join because you get it for free. Right now, you don't even lose anything, man. So please make sure you join my Locals community. I really, really appreciate it. Someone asked in the chat, where's my beer? I'm actually drinking wine today because I have leftover Thanksgiving wine. My husband drank all the beer yesterday, but I have leftover Thanksgiving wine. I'm about to be done with this Prosecco. And then after that, I have this bottle. I have a bottle that I only bought because I liked it. I thought it was pretty. Look at the rose on the bottom of the bottle. I don't even know if I like rosé, but we might break into it in the next discussion because the next discussion, let me get it up. Share screen, Chrome tab. Our next discussion is this: teaching the 1619 project educators share. So we are going to hear from real life teachers in high schools and as young as 8th grade, apparently, about how they are teaching the 1619 project. But during the next hour and 15-minute presentation, if you feel inclined to join my Locals, just to have something to do on the side, again, please make sure kb.locals.com, that's where it is. No, that is not my husband. Listen, there are that's not how my husband even spells his name. My husband spells his name with a K. He doesn't spell it with a C. I do it colloquially as a C, and he does it generally as a C, but his actual name is a K. So there are a million Victor Borisenkos in the world. A lot of people get it confused, but no, that's not my husband. Sorry. All right, let's go. Let's get started. Again, let me know if the sound is okay.
I believe we are now recording, and we should see our community start to join.
Trans.
Hi, everybody.
Trans.
Welcome.
Trans, calling it trans. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I don't really care.
Welcome.
But that's trans.
I think we still, the platform is still letting some of our community in today. So we'll give a little bit more time for folks to join, start in probably 1 minute. So this is a good time to fill your water bottle if you need to.
Yeah, guys, fill your water bottle.
So if anybody else
fill your wine glass. Let me know what you're drinking in the chat.
Feel free.
Cheers.
Welcome. All right, and this is teaching the 1619 project, Educators Share. We're so glad that everyone is here, and we will likely have some more folks joining. So no worries for anyone on the call today who is curious about what if I missed something. You will get access to the slides that you'll be seeing as well.
Hang on. Kurt has a question. Kurt says, there's a term I've not seen before on the bingo card, land blessing. Land blessing is when they say, we acknowledge that we are on the property of the indigenous people in land that was stolen many, many years ago. Land blessings have gone out of style in recent years. They have. I have not seen a recent land blessing up until that Microsoft presentation from like a couple weeks ago, where they were like, we acknowledge we are on the lands of these 87 different tribes. That's what a land blessing is. If you've got a land blessing square, please consider that my little present to you for a post-Thanksgiving freebie. Because sometimes the land blessing square is hard. Sometimes it just doesn't come up. It's the way it is.
As the recording of this session. And throughout this presentation, if you have any questions, you should see a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen where you can add questions. And we've left plenty of time to make sure that we get to as many of your questions as we can. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Fareed Mostofi, the Associate Director of Education and DEI lead here at the Pulitzer Center. And so excited to support this event today. An exciting conversation moderated by Nikita Stewart, Assistant Editor of the Metro section at the New York Times, also a contributor to the project. Welcome, Nikita. Thank you for being here, and an incredible panel that we've had the privilege of working with or connecting with over the past year and change. Scott Abbott, Director of Social Studies at DC Public Schools, Rebecca Coven, who's teaching
Just
English
as a
and
reminder,
social
they have been
studies at
telling
Sullivan
us
High
that
School
critical
in
race theory is
Chicago.
not taught in
Jason
schools, and I
Hall,
think that's about to be
the Acting
disproven.
Director of for the
All
Office of
K through
Culturally
12
and
schools.
Linguistically Responsible
All
Initiatives
K through 12
at Buffalo Public
schools.
Schools. Marissa Long, 8th grade social studies educator at Beverly Vista Middle School in Beverly Hills, California, and Christina Sneed, ELA, social studies curriculum and instruction lead at University City High School in St. Louis, Missouri. I wish we could all be in person to applaud this community, this group today. So please join me in sending them some silent applause or some good energy. Thank you all for being here. So we'll have a brief introduction and then move right into our panel. You'll see that we have about half of our session set aside for questions. Feel free to start submitting questions whenever you have them, and we'll be tracking those. But I did want to briefly let you know that the organization hosting today's session is the Pulitzer Center. Our mission is to raise awareness of underreported global issues, and we do that through direct support to journalists, staff, and freelance journalists reporting on these issues and in news outlets all over the world. And we also have programs of education and outreach. This is a slide that educators out there, when you get the slides, you can use to share with students what we mean when we say underreported stories. These are essentially issues that just aren't getting enough attention. And what we do is work with journalists
Deciding by whom?
who publish in all kinds
Who
of
decides?
publications to make sure they have the funding they need
hang on.
to report these stories and share them.
What kind of publications? What kind of publications are they talking about? BBC, PBS, NPR, Time, Washington Post, Boston Globe, CNN, San Francisco Chronicle. Basically, every woke publication on the planet is who they're working with. Every woke publication on the planet. I'm betting trans. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But that's what I'm betting. That's my bet. Yeah, Giorgio's been posting some great stuff in my locals lately. Please make sure you join my locals to see all of Giorgio's posts.
Them. And these are journalist passion projects, issues that are very important. So they range with topics connected to children and youth, people of all genders and orientations, environment and climate change, migration, land rights, conflict. So if you are interested in reporting to use in your classrooms, we encourage you to check out pulitzercenter.org. We also, as part of our education mission to help these stories get out there, but also explore how they can cultivate a more curious, informed, and empathetic and engaged public, our education department has developed programs connecting these news stories and journalists to students and teachers. And here's a glimpse at some of those programs. If you aren't already signed up for our newsletter, please, we encourage you to sign up. And if you would like to connect any of these resources, articles, lesson plans, student contests, virtual journalist visits, workshops to your classroom, please reach out. We were very fortunate to connect with the New York Times Magazine last year to support some initial curricular resources connected to the 1619 project, which we'll be exploring today.
They're supporting curricular resources.
These resources
How
are just
funny.
the beginning of an exploration through
How funny for a clearly nonpartisan organization.
Essays, 15 creative works, a 5-episode podcast, photography, primary source documents. And then you'll see our panel has brought in a lot of other resources to explore some really important questions. If you're looking for a place to get started, the link to the curriculum is in the slides here. But also part of what we hope you'll get out of today is hopefully some encouragement to apply to the recently launched 1619 Project Education Network. This is a program that's open to educators and administrators in K through 12 public, charter, independent, alternative schools in the US and US territories. Content specialists and curriculum supervisors working with these schools are welcome to apply, as are educators and administrators working with adults and youth in jails, prisons, or youth detention centers. And what is this application for? What we're trying to do is explore these guiding questions. How can the material that make up the 1619 project support existing curricula while also helping students evaluate historical research and process current events? Also, how can authentic engagement with media literacy skills and news stories, like the stories that make up the 1619 project, help students engage curiously, critically, and empathetically with the world, especially as they explore themes of racial justice? We're asking applicants to let us know how they can do the following: write a standards-aligned unit that is directed towards specific courses, manage the implementation and evaluation of that unit by at least 2 educators. So we're really encouraging teams of applicants for this that include educators, content specialists, administrators, maybe some of the community on our call today could work together to apply. And then committing to share their work so that the work that we're hearing about today from our panelists becomes part of a huge bank of curriculum that we can all draw from, grow from, and learn from. In exchange for all of this,
I can't, guys. I'm fast forwarding.
I think
okay,
at this point, we want to know, we have expertise in the room. How is this?
You know what's funny is like these presentations always have like the longest intro. You guys think my shilling for my locals and stuff is bad? Dude, these presentations always have the longest shilling and bios of any presentation. But okay, let's hear everyone's bio. Okay, let's do it.
This community explored the project in their classroom. So I'm going to go ahead.
Maybe I'm just getting persnickety because I haven't eaten that much today and I'm already starting to get buzzed from the giant glass of Prosecco that I've had, but that's all right. It's all right. That's what happy hour is all about.
And turn it over to our guest moderator, Nikita Stewart, to tell us a little bit more about what we have planned for today, her engagement with the project. And like you, I'm now going to sit back and start generating my questions and adding them to the Q&A. Over to you, Nikita.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And I am so happy that the Pulitzer Center has embraced the 1619 project and is getting it to so many educators and that it is getting into classrooms all around the country.
Remember that according to these people, critical race theory is not taught in schools.
I sat in a room that Nikole Hannah-Jones had gathered all of these academics and journalists, and we brainstormed on what the 1619 project should look like. And I left there thinking that I was going to write a story about food. And then Nikole and an editor approached me about writing a story about how enslavement has been taught in American schools through the years. And I knew a little bit about that because I was in school. I'm from Texas, which had been the textbook capital of the world. And I had something to say besides my education. I wanted to explore my great grandfather because he was a primary source. Years ago, he had been enslaved as a boy, and he was part of the Federal Writers Project, and someone interviewed him about his life as a boy. And so I was able to interpret that in my essay. And so now I'm going to talk to educators today about how they have incorporated the 1619 Project in their school districts and in their classrooms. And we will start.
But critical race theory is not taught in schools. Remember, for the entire Nikole Hannah-Jones had 35 minutes from the last video in which she could have said, the 1619 Project is not critical race theory, and here is how it's different. She didn't do that. Because the 1619 Project is absolutely critical race theory. It is 100% critical race theory. So now let's hear exactly how critical race theory is being taught in public K through 12 schools, even though all of these people would probably claim, oh wait, wrong point. All of these people would probably claim that we're not teaching critical race theory in K through 12 schools. I don't even know what you're talking about.
With a presentation from Scott Abbott, Director of Social Studies for DC Public Schools.
Thank you, Nikita. Well, I'm going to start off, and my position is actually a little different from many of my colleagues. Whereas some others are classroom teachers, my role as Director of Social Studies, I work in the central office for the traditional public school system in Washington, D.C., DC Public Schools. And so I work in the Office of Teaching and Learning, and while I'm no longer in the classroom as I used to be, my role sort of is supporting our teachers and students through various kinds of work. So I wanted to share a little bit of context for Washington, D.C. We are a district of 50,000 students and 117 schools. I work for DC Public Schools, which is a little bit more than half of the public school system within the city. Politically speaking, which I think is relevant for the implementation of this project, we're fairly monolithic, fairly liberal progressive city. And I do think that makes my role a little bit easier than some of my colleagues in other places, and definitely something you want to be thinking about as you implement this project. And then also we have somewhat of a centralized curriculum and teacher professional development system, which I think has led us to do some things that are pretty exciting with 1619 Project. In DC, we were really excited when the 1619 Project came out because we had already been looking at our curriculum through the lens of social justice. And we had actually just undergone an audit of our social studies curriculum, looking in particular at the...
So the DC public schools were already looking at their curriculum through a lens of social justice. Let's just rewind that a little bit. I just want to rewind a little bit. I just want to listen to that part again.
And then also we have somewhat of a centralized curriculum and teacher professional development system, which I think has led us to do some things that are pretty exciting with 1619 Project. In DC, we were really excited when the 1619 Project came out because we had already been looking at our curriculum through the lens of social justice. And we had actually just undergone an audit of our social studies curriculum, looking in particular at the ways in which we were representing diverse perspectives, questioning dominant narratives, and decentering whiteness. And so,
but they're not teaching critical race theory. This is from February, before they started getting in trouble for teaching critical race theory. So the timing of this matters. February 12th, 2021 is when this presentation happened. This was before they started getting in trouble. This was before they started using the line, we're not teaching critical race theory in schools. We don't know what you're talking about. He just admitted it. They were infusing it into the curriculum back in February. In all DC and DC charter schools. Fun fact, one of the organizations that I got canceled from after my Trump rally article went viral is I used to do work for the DC Charter Public School Board. Oh, they canceled me real quick. Oh, they canceled me real bad. They did. They had promised me work for 2022. I done good work for them. They canceled me so fucking quick. DC Charter Public School Board, which same organization, PS, that fired Jack Murphy. Raquel says this guy has way too much time on his hands. That's true with most educators.
When the 1619 project came out, we sort of very quickly gravitated towards it. And so when Fareed reached out to me and was like, hey, is this something that you all would be interested in? We very quickly connected about that. So Fareed, if you want to click to the next one yet. Our approach sort of goes in several different areas. So we focused on professional development for our teachers, on implementation of the 1619 resources within our curriculum. We created some student experiences.
Not even hiding it.
We've also looked at how we can use this to inform our standard revision. So in terms of professional developments, we have district-wide professional development days for our social studies teachers. And so you see two pictures here of professional development sessions that we hosted with our secondary social studies teachers in the 2019-2020 school year. Our teachers, for a portion of one of their professional development days, split up into grade level cohorts where they were looking at their own curriculum over the course of the day for each of their grade levels. But we started each session with a Paideia seminar discussion of Nikole Hannah-Jones's opening essay from the 1619 project. And that's what you can see in the picture there on the right, where teachers came together to discuss and themselves wrestle with the ideas that are proposed in Nikole's opening essay. Later in the day, we had another session that was co-led by one of our teachers, Adrian Glasgow from Dunbar High School, and also Fareed from Pulitzer Center. And they looked at how they created a session on how teachers could try to start implementing the 1619 project into their own classes. At that stage, it was fairly open-ended. And so we really were trying to get the resources into the hands of our teachers and let them try things out with their students to see what would work and what could be replicated and scaled up. Going along with that, we were able to get 5,000 copies of the 1619 Project magazine, which we distributed to our schools so that a class set was sent to every teacher of an 8th grade US History class, a 9th grade World History 1 class, and an 11th grade US History class. And we, over time, we were able to actually integrate some of the articles directly into this centralized curriculum. We did that in partnership with our teachers who came and worked with us over the summer.
Listen, look at what this says. Look at what this says. So in 8th grade U.S. History in Colonial America Unit, our democracy's founding ideas were false when they were written. Black Americans, I think that means Black Americans, have fought to make them true by Nikole Hannah-Jones. Look at this. In grade 11 U.S. History, our democracy's founding ideals were false when they were written. Black. I mean, it's just like the same thing, typo in the slide, but like they're not hiding it. They weren't hiding it at the beginning of the year at all.
List here, these are the specific places where we have explicitly built the essays into our curriculum that is used by teachers in every school in the district. Beyond that, we also wanted to make sure that students were very quickly getting exposed to these resources and taking advantage of some exciting events. So on the right side there, you can see at the very bottom there, you can see the tops of some heads of some folks that came together. Students came to share the work that they had done implementing and learning about the 1619 project, and then creating work on their own at an event that was held at the National Museum of African American History and Culture here in Washington, D.C. If you click one more time, Fareed, see one more picture. Yep. We also were lucky enough to have Nikole Hannah-Jones join us for a moderated discussion with students at
Thank you,
Dunbar
Kyle,
High
for the
School,
super chat.
which
Appreciate
also
it.
has a Black Studies program that was heavily using the project. We had a training there for our social studies content leads that are based in all of our middle and high schools. And then
middle
Nikole,
and high
kind
schools.
enough to have an interview with one of our
not
teachers,
just high schools, middle
for the
schools
benefit of
too.
our students. Students at another one of our high schools, Eastern High School, you see on the left there, were really inspired by the work they've been doing and learning about the 1619 project in their social studies classes. And so at their leadership, there was an event that they put on to help teach more people in the school and community about what they were learning through the project. The last angle I wanted to share is standards. Yeah, there we go.
What is that?
So,
let's look up that.
As in
Social
most states, DC
studies,
has, as in all states,
standards,
DC has state social
guiding
studies standards, which lay out
principles.
what students are meant to learn in every grade level or grade band.
Found it.
Our standards have not been updated since 2006. And so starting in the fall of 2019, shortly after the project came out, our team put together some testimony for the State Board of Education, encouraging
got that
them
pulled
to
up to look at
revise the
later.
state standards and in part to try to target the white racial bias that we were seeing in our current standards.
White racial bias.
If you see the guiding principles
Okay.
snapshot on the left, this document was adopted just a few months ago in December, and it is meant to guide the revision of standards, which is starting this month. Some of the principles embedded in there include revising the standards to include anti-racist framing, recognition of
Anytime you hear the term anti-racist, that means critical race theory. Again, he's laying out for you exactly how critical race theory is taught in schools.
Represented groups and an orientation towards teaching the hard history of slavery and
I got it.
racism. And a lot of these recommendations are based on the work that has been done as a result of the 1619 project.
Here, I'll put it in the chat so you guys can
my
see.
contact information, I think, is on this next slide.
On YouTube anyway.
But I'm happy to answer any
Hey,
questions during
Jaya.
the latter part of the session, and I'll pass it off to my colleagues.
Hi, everyone. Good
Chicago
afternoon.
Public
Colvin.
Schools.
I'm an English and social
I'm gonna
studies
look up her Twitter.
teacher in Chicago Public Schools at the high school level. And I'll talk a little bit about how we implemented the 1619 at the classroom level. So you can go to the next slide.
Got her.
So one of the goals of our class, this work was done in a humanities class combining English and social
She's got
studies,
BLM
and one
in her
of the goals of our
profile.
humanities class is to examine how historical
Pin
events
tweet
are
Nikole
really root
Hannah-Jones.
causes of contemporary social issues that can help us better understand and solve these issues. And so the 1619 project is a great resource to use.
Hang on. Let me just show you guys. Let me show you guys what's on her Twitter account. Let me just show you guys her Twitter account. Hang on. Look at this. Look at this! November 18th. The presentation we're watching is February. Look at this. Look at her Twitter account. Chicago Teachers Union. 2018 Learning Justice winner. BLM, Police Free Schools. Nikole Hannah-Jones, pinned tweet. Retweeting her. 1619 project. Oh, this is like, man. Day 3 of learning about youth organizing in Chicago. Why is she learning about youth organizing? Students are excited to start doing some of their own action planning next year. They're literally creating activists. It's almost a month old. She's literally talking on her Twitter account about creating activists. Last week in Social Justice Club, learning about cops out CPS. Wow. All right. Let's move back to the presentation. Let's hear what this little activist has to say. Bing.
For this, because it's a great opportunity to examine how the racial hierarchy that was created as a result of the institution of slavery and kind of the anti-Black sentiments, that racism that was cultivated during slavery still.
The anti-Black sentiments that were cultivated during slavery. The Brooklyn Way says, wait until you hear what my county just held sans the BOE awareness. They bust kids off-site and holy, is that what you're going to send me in locals? Holy shit. The Brooklyn Way, I cannot wait to hear about it. Thank you.
Still impact our social, political, and economic institutions today. But what I also really love about the 1619 project is it not only talks about this kind of racial hierarchy, but it also examines how Black resistance and Black innovation has contributed to our democracy and to our society. And so it really uplifts and celebrates the contributions of Black people throughout history and today. And I think that's really important because too often in schools, when we teach BIPOC students, and specifically Black students, when they see themselves in the curriculum, too often we talk about them as victims of oppression. And so our students don't have any opportunities to see themselves represented in a positive light in the curriculum. And it's really important to
Dude, you're the one who implemented this. You're the one who decided. People like you are, I shouldn't blame just her, because it's not just her. She's probably a useful idiot. People like you are the people who decided that Black people were oppressed. You are the people who implemented it in this curriculum. Progressive white women are the most cunning terrorist threat that this country faces. Progressive white women are the biggest problem that we have. I said it. Had almost a giant glass of wine. Progressive white women are the problem. Progressive white women like this. They're the ones teaching Black children that they're oppressed. Don't complain about, oh, Black children think they're oppressed. I don't know what happened. You taught them they were oppressed. That's what happened.
Celebrate the contributions of BIPOC to our communities, so they can see that positive representation as well. And so I love that the 1619 Project does that. And so if the goal of the 1619 Project is really to look at this lasting legacy of slavery in our country, what I want to do with students is localize it a little bit more and look at how
progressive
the
white
legacy of
women
slavery impacts social, political, and economic institutions in our communities today. So in Chicago, in Illinois, in their students' neighborhoods, at our school. So you can go to the next slide.
Racism
so the way we
is
did
racism
this,
is racism.
We started by, this was actually an activity based on Pulitzer Center curriculum. They started by creating an alternative timeline of US history, really reframing US history, thinking about 1619 as our nation's birth year. So that we used some companion resources from Learning for Justice, which is formerly Teaching Tolerance, and their Teaching Hard History curriculum to learn about the history of slavery. And from there, we moved on to work with the magazine. And we really honed in on the articles that look at how the legacy of slavery impacts various social, political, and economic institutions in our country today. So that whether that be our criminal justice system, our healthcare system, our infrastructure. And so students learned about that. And then from there, they created their own class-wide magazine called the 1619 Project Sullivan Edition. And so they created a magazine modeled after the 1619.
Okay, let me just read the questions here in case you can't see them. How can you see the racial inequity described in the article you read in your own community? So basically this has primed them, this assignment has primed them to see racial inequity, which equity is different than equality. Equity is about equality of outcomes, not equality of opportunity. We are not in favor of equality of outcomes because that means everyone ends at the same place, which gets rid of the idea of exceptionalism, gets rid of the idea of genius, it gets rid of the idea of creativity. What do you think should be done to address racial inequity? How have resistance, innovation, and advocacy by Black people contributed to your communities? They're starting with the answer to the question. They're starting with the answer to the question. They're assuming that all of this stuff exists. This is part of the most insidious part of how this is being taught in schools, is it's presented as an answer. Oh, well, inequity obviously exists, so how do you see inequity showing up? I'm sorry. I never agreed with the premise that inequity was a bad thing. I don't think variance in outcome is a bad thing. I think some people are going to be naturally more gifted at some things than others. I think those gifts should be honored. I think those gifts should be celebrated. I don't think we should be leading to equality of outcomes. That would make one of the most boring places on all of Earth. It would also negate any exceptionalism that exists. People should be encouraged to work hard. People should be encouraged to show up. People who do should be enabled to succeed at a higher level. If you don't show up, you should not assume that your success is guaranteed. If it was, there would be no incentive for you to work hard. The world does need ditch diggers. There's nothing wrong with being an effing ditch digger. There's nothing wrong with it. Be the best fucking ditch digger that you can be. Maybe you'll become the manager of the ditch diggers. Maybe you'll run a whole ditch digging company. There's nothing wrong with being a ditch digger, man. Nothing wrong with it. Part of the reason that this stuff is taking hold is because people are so insane about assigning value judgments to things. They think, oh, this is the only way to exist in the world and be successful. No. No. I have a friend who's a window washer. The way I met this friend is we worked together in my first professional job out of college. He used to wear a suit and tie to work. He looked very presentable. Became a window washer because he hated working in a corporate environment. He liked being outside. He liked doing other things. He ended up being one of those window washers that would scale tall buildings, rappel down the side, washing the windows on the outside. Eventually opened his own window washing business. There's nothing wrong with any of this. The fact that we're placing value judgments on this is a better existence than that, that's part of the problem. Not everyone is meant to be a CEO. Not everyone wants to be a CEO. Some CEOs are effing miserable. You got to find out what you're good at. You got to find out what you like. Embrace what you like. Find happiness. That's all that matters. These people are trying to get rid of all of that. I'm sorry, I'm going on a little rant right now. These people are trying to get rid of all of that. Not everyone is meant to do everything. Not everyone is meant to be a CEO. Not everyone is meant to make $1 million. Not everyone even wants to make $1 million. I'm not going to deny that money makes things easier. Not at all. But there's also a lot of pressure that comes with making a lot of money. There's going to be a lot of family obligations. Family members are going to show up. They're going to be like, why don't you pay for this and that and the other thing? You have the money. There's good and bad to everything. If we stopped assigning value judgments to everything to decide this is the way that everyone should live their lives, everyone is meant to have different experiences here. Some people are meant to be a CEO. Some people are meant to be rich. Some people are meant to be the top dog. Some people are meant to be a window washer. Some people are meant to be a ditch digger. Stop assigning value judgments. Focus on what makes you happy. I promise you, if you just focus on what makes you happy, regardless of what society thinks you should be doing, you're going to live a happier and more fulfilled life.
Project that contained stories that showed how they can see the racial inequity described in the article they had read in the previous step. So whether it's about mass incarceration, whether it's about infrastructure,
how they could see that inequity in their
own communities today. So at our school in Rogers Park, where our school is located in Chicago. And they also thought in their stories what should be done to address this racial inequity. And they also created stories about how resistance, innovation, and advocacy by Black people has contributed to our communities today. So if you could go to the next slide. So their final project, and the link is right there on the screen if you would like to see the full version. But
I just want to read this because I think it's important in the context of this overall discussion. Absolutely nothing wrong with being blue collar or simply an ordinary person. Being ridiculously driven is not required for your existence to be meaningful. That is exactly right. That is exactly right. If more people in the world just focused on what makes them happy, regardless of what anyone else thinks, we would have a better world. They'd probably be more successful too, to be honest, because when we follow what makes us happy, when we follow what we're supposed to do, when we follow what we're wired for, rather than what we think we should do to please society, your only goal on this planet should be to live a happy life by however you define happiness. You don't need to be a celebrity to be happy. You don't need to have a famous YouTube channel in order to be happy. You need to figure out what you want to do, what you like to do. Having a lot of money can create just as many problems as having no money at all. A lot of people don't realize this. Having a lot of money can create just as many problems as just as many challenges than having no money at all. There are different challenges, but they're challenges nonetheless. Find what makes you happy. Be honest with yourself about what makes you happy. That's all that matters. George Andre Veloso Nunez says, I just arrived in the stream. Welcome back. Thank you, George. I love being an English teacher and I have a crazy schedule, but I feel fulfilled. That's all that matters. All that matters is that you are happy. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. It only matters what you think.
They created a 42-page magazine that was completely researched, written, illustrated, and produced, including visuals, editing, layout, fact-checking, completely done by the 10th grade students. And students shared this work at our
Holy
first ever
shit.
Black Lives Matter Day of Action.
Look at this. How highways in Chicago have created racial segregation. Are you kidding me? Wow.
Last year. So that Day of Action actually came out of this work. And so I have some examples here of the work that they did. You can see on the left, a student did an illustration of how highways in Chicago have created racial segregation. On the right, there's an article about school-based health centers. We actually have a school-based health center at our school. If you go to the next slide.
Roads are racist. Highways are racist.
This is an example. Yes. So this is a student who had learned about mass incarceration, and she actually polled students in our school about their experiences with mass incarceration and interviewed them. If you go to the next slide. Yes, and this is a cartoon that a student did that was really fantastic. It's about, there's two characters.
For the record,
cartoon.
I can't even read it on my screen. It's completely blurry. I can't even read it.
From the north side, and
I would read it if I could.
Trying to get help through the healthcare system, and there are tons of other articles in the magazine that really range. There's portraits of the justice system. There's an article on restorative practices at our school to fight the school to prison pipeline. A student wrote a personal narrative about her experience living on the west side of the city.
Oh, hey, Alexandra, appreciate it.
There's an article about how our public transportation system has created segregation, and there's an article about redlining. It really ranges. Go to the next slide. And so this was really a growing experience for our students, and I wanted to share just a brief quote
I'm getting hiccups.
from the introduction that they wrote to the magazine. And they said, in the process of creating our own magazine, we were able to see how many of the issues discussed in the 1619 project could be seen in our own communities within the state.
Yes, because if you try to see something, you will find it. If you try to find reasons to dislike someone, you will always find them. If you try to find ways that inequity exists in your community, you will always find it. Why? Because people are not meant to all end at the same place. People have different skills. People have different desires. People have different motivations. If you look for inequity, you will always find it, because people are not designed to have the same outcome in life. You will always find inequity when you look for it. Congratulations. You found inequity because you looked for it, because people are not designed to be the same. They're not designed to have the same success by however you define it. Kurt also makes a good point. He says, but Chicago is run entirely by Democrats, yet it's systemically racist. Huh. Funny how that works.
City, neighborhood, or school. Amongst all of these inequalities, we had the opportunities to see the resilience, determination, and courageousness of people of color. Because of the resilience of enslaved Africans, other groups of people who are marginalized today and who have been marginalized throughout history have been given the opportunity to fight back, given hope by the success of others before them. That's just a brief overview of our project, and I'll pass it over to Marissa.
They're going fast. Oh my God.
So we'll go to Jason next.
To emancipate our curriculum.
Over to you, Jason.
To emancipate our curriculum. Holy shit. Wow.
Thank you very much, everyone. My name is Jay Hall. I'm the Acting Director of the BPS Office of Culturally and Linguistically Responsive Initiatives. We were asked the question, why did you connect the 16 project to your students?
1619 project, dude. Don't
Quite
sell it
simply,
short.
we did
Come on.
that because we wanted to lead with the truth. It's been
Oh.
far too long that we have not been leading with the truth. We also wanted to emancipate or free our curriculum from decades and decades of Eurocentric influence.
Wow.
The words of Nikole Hannah-Jones, I see my work as forcing us to confront our hypocrisy, forcing us to confront the truth that we would rather ignore.
Another guilty white
live in our office
progressive.
each day. The words of Congressman John Robert Lewis, to those who have said be patient and wait, we must say that patience is a dirty and nasty word. We have not waited. We have reframed our curriculum in history by placing the consequences of slavery, the contributions of Black Americans from 1619 through the Civil War to Reconstruction, the Civil Rights Movement, and today. Next slide, please. Not only has this brightened the future and brought the joy of learning to our Black students, but I'm proudly here to report to you today that I was asked by our Indigenous families to share the tremendous impact it has had on them as well. Let's look, for instance, at the California Gold Rush. Is the path to truth found on the bookshelves in America's classrooms? Why must we emancipate the curriculum? These are questions inspired by 1619 and the work done here by this team. We're asking ourselves each day. Read the review for this book, Hornspoon, especially the second paragraph, the last line. It does a great but humorous job of showing how a gold rush can affect individuals or a community. It's a fun story. These are books that we have found on our classroom shelves in Buffalo, and I'm guessing that these are the books that are found throughout America in our classrooms, which are purporting to teach the truth about things like the gold rush. Next slide, please. But the path to the truth must contain the truth. And if you look at these photographs, without saying, we know that a genocide took place. So our Indigenous families in Buffalo, which was born and developed on the land of the Haudenosaunee, we thank you for opening up different paths to the truth for our other Black and brown brothers and sisters and families here in Buffalo. Next slide, please.
They have to do that because they know
The next
exactly in
question was,
Buffalo
how
they're
did
not
you
going to get the black
engage your
card.
students with the project? Through our newly released compendium of over 150 built from scratch by teachers, lessons and experience called the BPS Emancipation Curriculum.
Holy
The
shit.
1619 project has provided us with an invaluable resource as we actively and with a sense of urgency
Land blessing!
layer text and truth in our curriculum to center joy in learning. What you see here is one portion of our 11 through 12 interactive emancipation curriculum lesson timeline. I'll show you more examples of that in a second, but I pulled out pieces from the cluster of the lesson that we've created for the idea of America. We use the podcast. The article by Nikole Hannah-Jones has been a wonderful anchor text, along with articles such as sugar, medical inequality, mass incarceration, and on and on and on. We have the anchor text now that provide a path.
This guy is such a good
to
white
truth
liberal, isn't
for
he?
our students
Oh my
and their
God.
families. Next slide.
He's emoting.
So what is the BPS Emancipation Curriculum? He said it's a series of over 150 lessons and experiences tailored to the historical, linguistic, and
Over 150 lessons in Buffalo public schools that are tailored to the historical figures and ethnic backgrounds of our students, offering students the opportunity to see themselves positively in the curriculum, raising marginalized voices in our district schools and classrooms and community, focusing on African Americans, Indigenous peoples, Latinx, they didn't capitalize the X, and new Americans, infused into standing curriculum by skill and content-based standards and alignment, actively working to dismantle the school to prison pipeline, and you're telling me critical race theory is not taught in schools. At least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those bullet points are critical race theory. Buffalo Public Schools admitting what's going on right here.
Ethnic backgrounds of our students. It offers students the opportunity to see themselves positively in the curriculum, cognitive, and it boosts cognitive emancipation. Seeing themselves
Cognitive
as people like
emancipation. Okay,
and
that's
Mansa
not a
Musa
real thing.
and John Lewis. These experiences raise marginalized voices in our district schools, classrooms, and community, with focusing on African Americans, Indigenous peoples, our Latinx families, and new Americans. It's infused into the standing curriculum by skill and content-based standards and alignment, and it's actively working right now to dismantle the school to prison pipeline. Next slide, please. I saw a question come up in the Q&A about resources for younger students and how we
It's so
link
blurry on my
16-19.
screen. I can't read
What
it. I
you
wish
see
I
here
could.
is an
I can't
example
read it.
from
It's
our
really
2
blurry.
through 4 band and our 5 through 6 band. And if I had the PK through 1 band, you would see that we've taken books.
PK
like
through
All
what?
Because You Matter. Remember that name.
PK. Hang on. Critical race theory is not taught in schools. Buffalo Public Schools, pre-kindergarten through 12, emancipation curriculum, interactive timeline samples. They're literally telling you that in Buffalo, it is taught in public schools starting in pre-K. Giorgio, you found PDFs of these? Link them in the chat, dude, or put them in locals. Put them in locals. That's a better option.
Remember Henry's Freedom Box, Emancipation of Grandpa Sandy Wells, a vast wealth of children's
Giorgio,
books that you
super
can use
sleuth.
at those lower grades for whomever posted that question to incorporate 1619. These timelines and this curriculum has changed the life of our parents, our students,
Really?
our teachers, our families.
Thank
and
you,
our
Giorgio.
community. And we thank you for the opportunity and for the inspiration from this team. Next slide, please. The journey continues here in Buffalo. We would like to thank the Pulitzer Center and the 1619 project team for your inspiration and continuous support.
She should.
In Buffalo, we say that we are the paradigm shift. We say that we don't play. Enough is enough. It's time to get in good trouble because patience is a dirty, nasty word.
This guy is like trying to do everything he can to make up for being a cisgendered white man. This guy is motivated. This guy's like, I'm gonna be the best ally that has ever been an ally in the history of allies.
Our Associate Superintendent, Dr. Fatima Morel, our fearless leader, would like to say thank you very much, as well as I would like to thank everybody here for the inspiration. And please join us when we welcome Nikole Hannah-Jones to our Urban Forum Conference on March 16th, 2021. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to share the courageous work that we're doing here in Buffalo.
A guy, Kate Slater, he is, isn't he? Progressive Rising.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa
grade.
Long, and
8th grade
I am
history.
a middle school
8th
teacher.
grade.
I currently
Middle
teach
school.
8th grade U.S. history and current events in Beverly Hills Unified School District. And this is our first dedicated middle school in Beverly Hills, and only our second year with BVMS. And I'm going to tell you guys how I and my team of colleagues built and implemented a 1619 project, versions of it, using it as a supplement for our Colonial America unit. Just like my colleagues, we're going to start with why connect this with students. I teach middle school, and middle school history is US history in 8th grade. And I remember being an 8th grader myself and not knowing the truth because we weren't told the truth. I really approach my craft, my job as a story, and I'm the storyteller. So it is my responsibility to tell them the entire truth. Waiting till high school is too late. This was also a
Why?
very interesting
Hang
year
on.
in Los
Hang on. Why is waiting until high school too late? Does anyone want to take a guess in the chat? Why is waiting until high school too late? Yeah, she's not a good presenter, Randall. You're right. But like, why is waiting to high school too late? Because by that time, the brain is more fully formed, and so it's actually more difficult to get information in there that will indoctrinate them for the rest of their lives. There is no reason, logically, to teach this stuff earlier and earlier and earlier when they should be teaching students things like how to read and how to write and how to do math. It is a lot easier to indoctrinate when you teach it earlier. That's why they're saying waiting until high school is too late. Because their brains are more developed. That is exactly right. That is exactly right. And listen, I said, like, I learned about slavery at least when I was in 8th grade. It may have been earlier, but I distinctly remember it in 8th grade. I distinctly remember it, which I think is fine. I think middle school is fine. I think elementary school should be taught reading and writing and math. I think those are the things you're teaching in elementary school. I don't think this stuff is really necessary, to be honest.
Angeles and throughout the nation with lots of civil unrest, lots of protest, even in the city of Beverly Hills, marching through the city for the very first time. My student body saw what protecting the domestic tranquility of a country looks like, and what it looks like when we have sort of this intersection of First Amendment rights with a Black.
These are the Trump rallies that were taking place. These are the Trump rallies that were taking. The walkaway rally was like right in this exact location. The walkaway rally we did was in this exact location that she has in her picture in Beverly Hills. That's what she's talking about. That's why she's got motivated, because people were fucking starting to actually have like Trump rallies and stuff. The Trump rallies in Beverly Hills were like off the hook. Every single week they had a Trump rally in Beverly Hills. Some of the best conservatives I know are in Beverly Hills, man, of all places. There is a thriving conservative community in Beverly Hills. I've been there many, 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 many times. I know exactly where this location is.
Black Lives Matter protest meeting a pro-Trump rally. The pictures that you guys see in front of you and the tweet are all from the city of Beverly Hills. They were all taken over the course of the summer. And as I watched these events unfold, and also sitting in a pandemic and wondering, am I going to go back to school with my students? Am I going to see them face to face? How am I going to tackle this? How am I going to contextualize this for my students? Because that's what history is all about. There's no point in talking about the past if you can't connect it to the present. One of my favorite photographers, Robert Frank, also said his photos always capture the humanity of the moment. And that's what I really wanted to capitalize on, the humanity of the moment that my students were currently engaged in for the very first time.
She's really thrilled with her
One of the
PowerPoint
things that
animations.
I do, because I am a middle school teacher, 8th grade is about building a deeper foundation for American history.
No.
So in preparing my students to talk about not only the 1619 project, but other current events that I would bring into class. And just like my colleagues have said, you have to talk about politics. This is also an election year. What unfortunately happened was the week before.
Why are you influencing an election?
Donald Trump tweeted that the 1619 project was indoctrination. And before we even started, we were already getting emails from parents wondering about the curriculum. One of the ways that I like to foster my classroom environment is through openness and safety. And I wanted to give them a safe space to have conversations, to ask questions with a trusted adult, with someone that was going to come from a place of no judgment. What you guys see in front of you is also one of the activities I do with my students.
Wait, side note.
It's called
Can I have a point of personal privilege? Because I'm kind of getting buzzed. Can I have a point of personal privilege? Okay, hang on. Look at this mug that I got in London. It's the Tower of London, and it has an axe as a handle. How great is that mug? Tower of London, probably my favorite thing I visited in London, by the way. But the Alice in Wonderland exhibit at the V&A was actually really effing cool. Anyway, okay, let's get back to it. Point of personal privilege over.
spectacles. We all make these paper glasses, and it's a way for us to understand that the conversations we have, the people that we have them with, they all come with their own unique lenses in which they view the world. And our job is to listen to understand, not always to listen to respond. So anytime something would happen that would, bring about a lot of different opinions or debate, I would always say, okay, put on your spectacles. Let's try to see this from a different point of view. And it's a really fun activity. Obviously, we all look super cool. And part of the beauty is that the kids all, they're comfortable because they all look the same for one moment. And I guess really as a middle school teacher, as the only middle school teacher on the panel,
Giorgio.
I know that in California, they're not going to get US history again until they're juniors in high school. It's too late.
I'm sorry, what? They're not going to get US history until they're juniors in high school? Bullshit. California has implemented an ethnic studies curriculum that makes that very fact impossible. I'm sorry. No, I do not agree.
Waiting until high school is too late.
Why?
The middle school is an appropriate place to bring in
Why?
these kinds of conversation.
Why?
With the full truth, not the half truths. I remember reading
Why?
the book when I was in graduate
She's not giving me a
school,
reason
and
why.
Much too late, but in graduate school, lies my history teacher told me, and I was not going to be one of those history teachers. I was going to tell them.
Oh, she learned
as
it in
much
graduate school. Oh, okay.
As I could,
must be
within
true
the
then.
context of our standards. So next slide for Reed. This is how I did it. Everyone has their own take on how they use the material, as my team and I did. We all came together to brainstorm with the help of my very supportive principal, Kevin Allen. What are we going to anchor this on? Well, first we have to build a foundation, and that's what we do. Since our first unit is colonial America, I really felt it important to start the dialogue early. So we started the conversation in September, and it culminated with a research project that came to an end in October. So these are some of the foundations, some of the hooks that we used, and ultimately everything was anchored through our essential questions. They were exposed to these 5 essential questions before they actually began the research, before we actually began diving deeper into
Hang on, what are the essential questions? Okay. How has the history of slavery impacted modern American society? To what extent are racial and social tensions today in America, a legacy of slavery? Okay, that assumes the answer to the question. Is the 1619 project justified in its aim to highlight slavery in American history? Explain why or why not. Now, if a student actually said, no, it's not, how do you think they do in that class? What grade do you think they get in that class? How did slavery play a role in the writing of our Constitution? To what extent is the legacy of slavery connected to the rights of other groups, i.e. human rights, gay rights, disability rights, and women's rights? That certainly doesn't seem to be answering the question, does it?
Of slavery and its effects and repercussions and how it connects to what's happening now. But these essential questions, they saw ahead of time, like I said, and they would have to answer one by the end of our exploration. You can go to the next slide for Reed. One of the first things I did after we did some background is we started with more foundation and a different kind of a background. I had polled my students and given them a learning modality quiz before we started this unit as part of my getting to know them. And I found that at least 1/3 of my students reported being auditory learners. So I loved the podcast. The podcast is beautiful.
Tell your kids not to answer questions like that if they're in public schools. Guram says, point of privilege, love your mug. Thank you. It's so cool. It's so cool. Look at that. It's got an axe as a handle. Come on, man. Another one, keep holding the weak and weakening cadre's feet to the fire. I'm doing my best, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for the support.
The podcast I'm a big fan of. I've listened to all episodes, but really only one episode hits 8th grade standards. So I decided to use episode 1 along with a guided digital notebook where we would stop after listening to a little bit of the podcast to analyze some of the sources that we were listening to, some of the feedback we were listening to. And this is also an early way to teach evidence analysis. They didn't quite know that they were analyzing it because of the way it was broken up. We had a quote, a direct quote from the podcast. What does it mean to you and why does it matter? So after every small piece of podcast, we did not listen to it in one day. 45 minutes sounds like an amazing podcast to me, but for 8th graders, I'm going to lose them. So we broke this up over the course of 2 days. Ultimately, their task was to now do a research project where we were not only going to look at the institution of slavery, but also the context in which the 1619 Project has been debated in this country. And that was one of the most fascinating things, to bring in literally what was happening within the last couple of weeks. And my colleague, my brilliant colleague, Zach Safi, if you can go to the next slide, Fareed, he built out a Google site that had a ton of amazing resources that the history department used as their anchor research site. All of these articles were tailored, handpicked. All of them showed both sides of the coin because we were talking about perspective. So part of the questions were, well, what is a creator's perspective? Why does she think that we should be talking about this in school? And what is the other perspective? Why do they not think that we should be talking about it in school? And we also dove into bigger concepts that I knew for a lot of kids they were being exposed to for the very first time. So we also needed to go slowly, and a lot of handholding and explanation was involved. We talked about things like mass incarceration, like my colleague Rebecca. We talked about the idea of systemic racism. Does it exist? Does it not exist? And finally, what kind of America do you see? Now that you have all of this new perspective, what's your opinion on it? And these were some of the projects that I lifted some examples for you guys from. My students got to pick who they wanted to work with, and they all had
the same answer to the project. Oh my God, I don't know how that happens.
Answering questions for students while all at the same time.
Yeah, our PowerPoints are not good. I agree.
Sort of try to get some parents that were really upset to sort of see this project in its entirety. It was a really valuable experience, but I think
we tried to get the parents who were really upset to just calm the F down and let us teach their students, their children rather, that systemic racism is a real thing. And I don't even know why they were upset in the first place. All right. Mandatory Carry says, keep fighting, build a get home bag. Remember, number 9 or 17 is coming, and there are 4 lights. Trench rats unite. Thank you, Mandatory Carry. Appreciate it. Appreciate the support. Guys, if you're enjoying this, please mount that like button. We do this every Friday at 3 p.m. We watch some woke training. We talk about it. At some point, I get rather drunk and I start to mock it relentlessly. I think we've reached that point. Mostly because I haven't had much to eat today. My own fault, really. But we're going to keep going, and we're going to make our way through this rest of this presentation, which is educators in K through 12 schools. This woman right here teaches at a middle school, 8th grade level, talking about how they are teaching the 1619 Project, which is critical race theory, which they claim is not taught in public schools, but we of course know that is a raging lie.
Rewarding part is what you guys are going to see on the next slide. The reflections from my students.
Oh, how interesting.
My team took a risk doing this in such a highly charged political.
Okay, these are very blurry to me, but I can read up here. I thought the 1619 Project was good and educational. I like how we get to work in groups and we got to choose who we wanted to work with. I also liked how it was a slideshow and the whole project wasn't a huge essay. I honestly thought it was great hearing the podcast and writing our opinions on such a large and important topic like slavery and racism. It was fun working with partners who had the same views as me and writing on our own and forming our opinions on racism. As 13-year-olds, we don't get to use our opinions like adults can. I wonder who taught them that. Like voting or other things like that. But with this project, we get to express what we thought about the country in our own way and learn the good and bad of the country and actually learn something about social inequality, which of course is not the word that this teacher has used. She's used equity, but they think it's inequality, and see what BLM protesters are fighting for, and instead of just hearing about it on the news.
Climate. And as you saw from some of the pictures before, Beverly Hills was the epicenter of
Trump
a
rallies.
Donald Trump rally almost every Saturday.
Every
My kids
Saturday.
couldn't ignore it. They couldn't get away from it. I really wanted to know how they felt about this entire experience.
Thank you, Scott. You won't regret it.
And as things unfolded, almost by the day, every time they went to the website, it was updated with something new. And you can see
so you can see this teacher is literally like, she's basically admitting, like, we taught this because Donald Trump had a lot of support in Beverly Hills and we didn't like that. And Donald Trump was having a lot of rallies. So we taught their kids the 1619 Project. Congratulations. Pull your kids out of public schools. If you live in Beverly effing Hills, I'm sorry. If you live in Beverly Hills, there is no reason why your kids should be in public schools. I'm sorry. No reason. Homeschool them. You have the resources for it. I know you do. I've been to your houses. I've been to fundraising events at your houses. I know you have the resources for it, Beverly Hills. Homeschool your kids, please.
Overwhelmingly, the response was positive. It wasn't all positive from everybody, but that's okay. We started a really important conversation. And the things that they shared with me, they shared because they felt safe sharing those things. My favorite reflection is the one that I put an arrow to. This student says, I honestly thought it was great hearing the podcast and writing our own opinions on such a large and important topic like slavery and racism. It was fun working with my partners who had the same views as me and writing our own and forming our own opinions on racism. As a 13-year-old, we don't get to use our opinions like adults can, like voting and other things like that. But with this project, we can get to express what we thought about the country in our own way and learn the ideas, learn the good and the bad of this country, and actually learn about social inequality and see what BLM protesters are fighting for instead of
equality is not the same as equity. Gentle reminder, equality is not the same as equity.
All I needed to hear to know that I was doing exactly the right thing. This bottom reflection as well. It just made me dive into the history of slavery in America a lot further and got me thinking a lot about the topic and other perspectives on 1619. Basically, it pushed me into a dark room with a match and I came out with a flashlight. And that is why, regardless of the experience that I had, that I will speak to later, I won't stop doing this. Just like my colleague before me said, sometimes it's okay to get into some good trouble. And I definitely got into some good trouble because of the work that we did.
Wow.
But I don't regret it for a second. Passing it on to my next colleague.
Thank you, Marissa. It's a pleasure to be with.
All right, guys. I'm sorry. Point of personal privilege. I need to go to the restroom. I do. I need to go to the restroom, but I'm gonna let this play. And you guys can write anything you want in the chat, and I will be right back in like 2 seconds because I'm the quickest bathroom break person ever. I'm sorry. I've had a lot to drink. I'm sorry. I'll be right back. I'm going to let this play while I'm gone.
You tonight to talk about a work that I'm so passionate about. Studying the 1619 Project really was groundbreaking work and an awesome experience for our students, our families, and our entire community. I have the honor and pleasure to serve at the school district of University City under the leadership of Dr. Sharonica Hardin-Bartley. And the principal of the high school, Mr. Michael Peoples, both of those leaders worked together to support me, my work as an English teacher, trying to have my students work through the 1619 Project. And I stress English teacher because you would think that this would naturally be a good fit for social studies. But what I'm going to talk to you about is how we took this work and created a deeper learning experience for students that was cross-curricular, that was an example of project-based learning that really focused on engaging students and building skill in the process of it. So when we really talk about how to hit the standards. And I think that that is for all of those educators out there saying, how can I do this without the government really getting upset, DESE getting upset, parents getting upset. We have to make sure that we're still addressing the standards. So I made sure that all of the necessary standards from Common Core.
What is the relationship between Ruth and reconciliation? What
even
the
the
fuck?
NCSS and C3 standards for social studies were hit throughout this work.
Wow.
And I really tried to keep the essential questions as broad as possible because I wanted to make sure that the students were constructing meaning as much as possible. And I didn't want to lead them down any particular path. I wanted them to be able to walk away with whatever landed in close to home for them. And when we just look at these questions, who writes history? When I tell you how much time we spent just on that question, because the answers, those who have power, those who have money,
bing, 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 bing.
white men, the answers that they started coming up with started leading to other questions and other questions.
Did anyone find it ironic that they were being taught by a Black woman that white men write the history? Did anyone find that a little ironic that they were literally being taught by a Black woman that white men write the history? I think that's a little ironic myself, just saying.
We determine what is true. Well, that's a good question. How do we determine it? And they started thinking about it. Well, is it historians? Is it religious leaders? Is it the elders? Like, who determines what's true and how is that passed down from generation to generation? And then what is the relationship between truth and reconciliation? And if we really think about the heart of this work and why I'm so passionate about it, we have never reconciled from the trauma, from the pain of the system of slavery that was the foundation of this country. We've never dealt with it. And even now you're seeing in the news how discussion about it is trying to be squelched at every turn. And we are being combated just for trying to teach content and trying to engage students in this learning.
Are you saying the 1619 project is critical race theory?
The next slide, I really want it to be clear that the students owned this project. And this is actually a slide
that
my students created. Because
you
what
are
they
the owner
did
of the project.
when Tom
Sorry.
Cotton tried to introduce legislation to prevent the teaching of this work, and Donald Trump came out with a statement bashing the 1619 project, my students were like, oh no, he's not. We have to make sure.
Oh really? So you made them little activists, did you?
Because it was so enriching for them. They were so passionate about it that they created a presentation and presented to our Board of Education to make sure that they could still learn from this, and they advocated for it being introduced at younger ages.
They advocated for it being introduced at younger ages. I wonder where they got that idea from. Do you think, how many of you have high school students? I'm just curious. How many of you in the chat? How many of you watching right now, whether you be watching on YouTube or Rockfin or Odyssey or any of the other places, how many of you have high school age students? How many of you who have high school age students think that those high school age students came up with the idea that, oh my God, they should be teaching this at all grade levels? Does anyone remember what it's like to be in high school? Because I don't think I would have had that idea in high school. I think I was a selfish little shit in high school, and I think most people are selfish little shits in high school. No one had that idea in high school. The only people who had this idea are the teachers. That is it. That is it. No one with high school age children says, oh, maybe we should teach the systemic inequities at all grade levels. No one says that. That's not real. You're making that up. I'm sorry. No. If anyone wants to argue with me in the chat, you're welcome to, but I don't think I'm wrong. I think I'm 100% right. Exactly. Jennifer says, my high school senior never thinks about younger kids. Exactly. No. That didn't happen. That's not real.
So I have here.
Look at this. Look at this. Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. She actually had an essay writing and debate.
what my student kind of listed as kind of like our journey through studying the 1619 project. And when I thought about how to unpack this work for them, I really thought it to be most important to connect the what with the why. And many times we put content before our students. We have them reading essays and everything, but why? Like, what are they supposed to take away from it? What are they supposed to do with it?
That's a good question.
So I started with content that was closest to them. And we started with Nikole Hannah-Jones' podcast, The Problem We All Live With, because we live by Normandy school system. I actually graduated from Francis Howell High School. So when we start talking about school segregation, we're in a segregated school. Let's talk about that. And I made sure to unpack this work in a way that really hit close to them, and I allowed them to drive the process. Next slide, please. So what my students really felt was the most impactful part of this. And I'm not going into everything because I have had the pleasure and privilege of speaking before. So if you look at previous webinars, excuse me, you can kind of see more details about the work that we did, and it was more extensive. I wanted to go in depth talking about what they walked away with as being life-changing experiences and conversations. And it really centered around what has changed over all of this time, and why are people saying that this is not true when there is evidence of every single thing that we are dealing with as a challenge within our country and within our society, and it having a direct connection to the legacy of slavery. And the one that they really talked about was the healthcare system. So when we just talked about like the roots of the healthcare system and how some have access to quality healthcare system, some have protection in the healthcare system, and some don't. And so we read about Dr. Sims, the father of modern gynecology. And I had the students just ask the question, who gets protected in the system and who doesn't? And this was connected to episode 4 in the podcast and the article about how the bad blood starts. And when we started talking about Black bodies and the value of life, and started thinking about all of the experiments that had been inflicted upon Black bodies and how enslaved people were used, specifically enslaved women, were used as cadavers. Next slide. How they were experimented upon, not even being given any anesthetic, any type of care or concern, because they weren't considered human. And because they actually thought that Black people had a higher pain tolerance
relevant
than white people, than other people. So we don't need to worry about them. They don't feel pain. We can do anything. And my students were reading this and they were listening to the podcast that talked about after the emancipation and how the former enslaved people were just set free with no health care, no type of shelter, no clothes, no protection, and how heaps of bodies.
People in the chat are pointing out how anesthesia is like a modern invention. It wasn't used then.
And how the white communities fought to keep the people out for fear of syphilis spreading and different diseases spreading.
You know, these people would have a whole lot more of my sympathy for these, because I honestly do think there are still related issues to this. I really do. But the fact that they will not acknowledge that this is not our present day reality and that we have made progress since then makes me want to ignore their entire effing argument. Because they're not interested in talking about real problems. They're only interested in weaponizing past wrongs to gain more power today. That is it. This is not about solving these problems. If it was about solving the problems that emanated from shit like this, you would have no problems with me. But that is not what this is about. This is about weaponizing past wrongs in order to gain more power today. That is all this is about. And this is also about radicalizing children in order to destabilize the system. The reason this is taught is the same thing as what they did in Maoist effing China. It is about weaponizing youth in order to dismantle the system. That is all that this is about. This is not about solving any problems. That's why I have the biggest issue with this. This is not about solving problems. This is not about righting wrongs. This is not about making a more equal society. This is only about weaponizing past wrongs in order for them to gain more power. That is it.
And then they compared that to what happened throughout history, where Black people were experimented upon or Black people were denied health care, even today, when we talk about COVID-19 and how it has disproportionately
Really, because Black people
impacted
actually
Black
got
and brown
disproportionately more
communities.
health care.
And even right now, who's getting
Provably.
vaccinated and who is not? Who has true access and who does not?
In a lot of states,
So I had
white
a
people got
conversation with
vaccinated
students
after Black
even
people.
today
Sorry.
where they are planning a project connected to how do we get the word out there that this really is a problem, and it's a problem that is directly connected to the system of slavery that we have never dealt with, that we've never really truly uncovered.
Yeah, exactly. I want to
to the
know where
point where
Black
we're-
people are
we're
being
actually
denied
going
health
to do
care.
something
I want
about
an example. I want
Next
a specific
slide.
example. Where are
So my
Black people being denied
students
health care?
wrote so many reflections, and they were 11th and
Oh,
12th graders,
universal
so they
health
wrote
care.
so
Oh,
much,
it's
and
all
I'm
about
just going
race.
to share
Okay,
with
it's
you
not
just
about how much it
one
would cost.
snippet.
It's all about race. That's all
The
it
student
is.
said, at the same time, conflicting beliefs over the strength of African Americans were seen as accepted medical knowledge. As noted in the text, Living While Black Killed My Mom by Damon Young, James Marion Sims, regarded as the father of modern gynecology, used Black women as test subjects because of the belief that they possessed a supernatural tolerance for pain. In his brutal experimentation, Sims was successful in finding a cure, but the belief that Blacks were stronger goes against the ideology expressed as a result of their high death rates. So on one hand, you have whites arguing that Blacks were too weak to live without the whip and that they needed white masters to be able to live and survive and thrive.
Who argued that?
But on the other hand, they believed their tolerance for environment and for pain was that above whites. This seemingly contradictory viewpoint still holds true to an extent in modern times.
Where?
And they walked away just feeling like it's hypocrisy at its finest, and it's staring us
Give
in
an
our face
example.
every single day.
She can't give an example.
Next
That's why she
slide.
won't. Can't give an
So
example.
when they talked about the criticism and they
That is
presented
just a
before
lot.
the
Like,
board, this
my
is another
God.
slide that they created.
My God. Okay,
You can
hang
go to
on.
the next slide.
No. God damn it. I wanted to see that Trump tweet. What was the Trump tweet? Department of Education. Okay, so the tweet says California has implemented the 1619 project into public schools. Soon you won't recognize America. And Trump retweet. Don't you guys miss Trump on Twitter? I miss Trump on Twitter so much. I got 3 Trump retweets. 3. And it was great. It was everything. I loved my Trump retweets. Anyway, Trump says, Department of Education looking into this. If so, they will not be funded. Too bad that white women ruined that for all of us. George Andre Velasco Nunez says, Black people might be denied health care if they are not poked. Whose idea was that? That is a good point, George. Black people would be denied health care if they are not vaccinated. I think that's systemically racist. Just my opinion. Just my opinion. All right, guys, we got about 20 minutes left. We're going to get through this. Let's go.
For the board, this is another slide that they created. You can go to the next slide. One of the biggest things that they wanted to do was advocate for just the topic of race to be introduced into school at earlier ages. And
No,
really
they didn't. You
stressed
made
the
that
fact
up.
that this will never
Sorry.
change
No.
until classmates are forced to interact with and have hard conversations around hard truths and hard history with classmates that don't look like them, learning about families that don't live the way that they live and don't have the same experiences as them. And if we don't do that, racial ignorance and
Many
bias
history
will never
textbooks are
decrease.
whitewashed,
It
and
will
using
never
texts like
go
the
away.
1690 Project is a good way
And
to
we have
introduce
to
the
start
history that
using
textbooks
resources
omit.
like the 1619 Project to combat the whitewashed history, the omission, the erasure.
Definitely not
of the
critical race theory.
experiences, the lived and shared experiences of Black and Brown people
Definitely
within this
not.
country.
She said sarcastically.
So
Oh
they
my
wrote poetry,
God.
they created an
What the
entire
fuck is this?
museum space. We commandeered this space to be able to curate our learning, because they even wanted to share their learning with teachers within our building who did not agree with the teaching of the 1619 Project. And one of the reasons an English teacher taught it was because the social studies teachers wouldn't.
It's
And
a
we
shrine.
hadn't gotten to the place then
Magnus,
where
you're
we
right.
were
It's a
doing it
shrine. They made a
district-wide,
religious
but that
shrine.
is our plan for next year.
Holy shit.
So when we're talking about all of this, I just appreciate the opportunity to share my knowledge, expertise, and my passion for this work.
I want some Q&A. Let's get some Q&A. I want that fucking white male teacher in the middle to be asked some questions. And the one in the upper left too.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, these presentations were amazing. I cannot believe how hard you all have worked on the curriculum. I'm blown away because you're all doing something different. And yet one of the things that I believe that the 1619 Project has
Scott,
done,
you're right. They colonized the
other
space.
than
They did.
helped us rethink the way this country was founded, it has introduced, like, the days of multiple choice and reading the text, that's over. Our students are now learning how to analyze for themselves and decide who is writing history. And so with that, I think we have to address the elephant in this virtual room with all the hundreds of us that are in here. How do you handle the pushback that is happening right now? It includes Iowa, which is Nikole Hannah-Jones's home state. We talk about that often. And I know some of you come from more liberal districts. So I would like for Marissa and for Christina to address this question, because I know you all have experienced some pushback. So please share how to navigate the pushback.
Yeah, so I teach in Beverly Hills, and it is a very affluent community, but it's also evolving. And when I would say when I started 8 years ago, it was very conservative, and I've seen a lot of change. My colleagues and I, we touched on the 1619 Project last year with not one piece of negative feedback in general. This year was quite a different story. Like I said earlier, Donald Trump had tweeted that the 1619 Project was indoctrination 1 week before I started it. A small group of parents.
She is so Trump deranged. She's like,
to me first, complained that they didn't want me to do this.
Good.
Then went to my principal, complained to him.
Oh no, accountable to the parents, not that, anything but that.
And circulated a petition to get me fired and stop the teaching of the 1619 Project in our district. And that had an unintended effect, because people came out of the woodwork writing letters of support to the school board, writing letters of support to me, because I was called out personally. I was the villain and my principal was my co-conspirator, and we had this master plan of
this lady is seriously Trump deranged. Oh my God.
That wasn't the truth. And we knew that if people actually looked at what we were doing, they were wrong. But they hadn't before they made these accusations. I was supported at all levels of our district, from my principal all the way to my superintendent, who at a board meeting made a very public statement, basically denouncing what was going on and telling parents that if you don't have a social studies credential, you don't get to decide what happens in social studies classrooms. This was really hard for me to deal with because up to this point in my teaching career, I had gotten nothing but praise, awards, positive feedback, nay, a negative review, nothing. So I had to realize, though, that this would not have been happening if all of these other real world events weren't also unfolding on top of my curriculum. And talk about the humanity of the moment. I went from a range of emotions, from being super like cavalier about it, like not a big deal, to, oh my gosh, what's going on? These people are crazy, to, am I actually going to get
She's saying that
fired,
about
to
parents,
enraged,
by the way. Oh my
and
God, what's going on? These people
also,
are crazy.
like, lit
Saying that
up
about
to
parents.
continue to keep going
Parents.
because I knew it was the right thing to do. So anyone that gets pushback from this, my advice to you would be ready to connect everything back to the standards, because that's what I did. Everything always went back to the standards. So there's no reason that I can't also use this as a supplement. And I also got very fortunate that I had such an supportive administration and superintendent and colleagues who knew that this was a one-off, a weird isolated incident, and it was something happening because the year 2020 was a dumpster fire. And I hope that none of you hear my story and hear my experience and are afraid to try, because I really felt it was important to start introducing this at a younger age. And
I thought it was
respond to
important to
everything that these students were
indoctrinate kids when they were
experiencing in the summer
younger,
before
so
I
I would
got to
have an
them.
easier time with them when they
So
got to middle school.
don't give up, keep it up. All of us here are here to help you and share resources. I will give you anything you want. We don't need to recreate the wheel. We can just use each other's amazing work and make this really a national movement at a grassroots level.
Thank you. Christina, if you could just quickly address, because I know you had issues in your district with, you talked about how the social studies teachers didn't want to do it. So can you talk about how you navigated that and what you're going to do going forward?
Yes. So I am from Missouri, which is one of the 5 states where senators have introduced legislation to punish school systems that teach the 1619 Project. So we have pressure coming from the state level, and then within the actual school, we have some people who don't believe that it is historically accurate. Everything that the 1619 Project
it's not
says,
historically accurate.
is not being accepted by historians. And so the biggest thing that I say is we need to consider this a text, and we put text, high quality, rich, powerful text in front of our students every single day, whether it's a novel, a short story, or whatever. So what I say is, no matter who disagrees with what the 1619 Project says, they shouldn't disagree with your approach, because you're going to teach students to interrogate the text.
No, you're
just
not.
like you would
Please.
if it was Of Mice and Men, or if it was
oh
The
my
Jungle.
God.
No matter what it is.
Bullshit. I call bullshit. What do you think this woman is going to do if a student in her class in high school says, I don't think the 1619 Project is historically accurate? What do you think a student who answers that on a test or writes that in an essay is going to experience? I don't think it's going to be good. I don't think they're going to get a good grade. We teach students how to interrogate the text. Bullshit. I call bullshit. You aren't teaching them how to do anything. You're saying, accept this reality as we're framing it for you, or else you're going to get a bad grade and you're never going to get into college.
Is you're putting in front of them, you teach them to question,
no,
to write
you're
about
not.
it, to think deeply and critically about it. So when naysayers try to come for me or for my practice, there's nothing they can say, because I make sure that I approach
I
it
can
with
say you're a
objectivity,
liar.
with making sure all of the standards and all of the skills that are supposed to be covered are the focus. and making sure that the student-centered approach is what is
Liar,
driving every
liar,
action
pants
that I
on
take.
fire.
And so because of that, I have had support, and that's what I advise anybody else who's interested in this work. This is a text.
These
a
people
rich,
are making
powerful,
all of this
beautiful
shit up.
text that
Making
is
it
incorporating
up.
so many different types of
I've got a
literature.
world-class
You have
bullshit
the
detector.
audios, the images, the
Making
poetry, the
this
essays.
up.
And when you think about having students read that, it is our responsibility as English teachers, social studies teachers, especially the
I may be drinking, but that only makes my bullshit detector
it's
stronger.
our job to teach kids
It releases
to read
my
anything
resistance.
and
I have more of a
everything.
bullshit detector when I'm drinking.
So we
She's
should
making this
not,
shit up.
we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Look
And
at this guy at the
allow
bottom. He's
people
like,
to get
yes.
caught up on the
Well,
content,
guy.
and we need
He,
to,
him.
refer them
Pronouns.
back to our underlying goal as
Yes.
educators,
Stunning and
to
brave.
build our
Stunning
students'
and
skill and their
brave.
foundational knowledge. And if that just happens to be with the 1619 project, then they're growing as people in the process.
Georgia, students are dumb. Here's the thing. These people prey on students being dumb. Why? Because they're in high school. They're in high school. The human brain does not develop the logic and reason function fully until they are in their early to mid-20s. And these people know this. High school students are dumb. They are. And these people take advantage of them.
Thank you. Thank you. Another question of many of the folks who are out there watching, they want to get some guidance on how to
Dude. Look at this. Jack says, YouTube asshole, you're not coming up live like the rest of my subscriptions here. All notifications too. Such a joke. Must be doing good things. Keep up the good work and thank you. Dude, I know. YouTube has totally and completely fucked me. And I'm not happy about it. They unsubscribe people from my channel every day. By the way, if you're not subscribed, make sure you're subscribed because YouTube has probably unsubscribed you if you were subscribed at one point. It's the most frustrating thing on this planet. To be doing nothing wrong, to be following all their terms of service, to have everything effing monetized, and yet they quarantine me away from everyone. 90% of the people who watch my videos are already subscribed to my channels. That's the reality. 90 effing percent, because YouTube doesn't serve my videos to anyone who's not already subscribed to my channel. Very, very rare. It's the most frustrating. I cannot even tell you guys, which is why it's important you join my locals community, kb.locals.com. It's in the ticker. Use the promo code Friday to get a free month of supporter status. Up until Sunday, you can use that.
reach students who might not read at a level that they should be reading at, or how can you
thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
Students. And so maybe we'll start with Rebecca, because you're in middle school, I think. And then if we could also hear from Scott. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks, Nikita. I'd love to speak to this. I teach at the high school level, but almost the majority of my students come to me reading below grade level.
Oh, gee, I wonder why, because they're not taught to read, because they're teaching to be little activists.
Of the 1619 project, and what I love about it is that it's a multitude of mediums, right? It's not just written text.
Wait. Do you love how this woman teaches at a high school level, and she's like, most of my students come to me and they can't read at grade level, and she doesn't think that's a problem. She's like, we're going to teach them the 1619 project. She doesn't talk about how it's a problem that most of her students are coming to her not reading at grade level. Because if they talked about how it was a problem that most students are not coming to her teaching at grade level, or reading at grade level rather, they'd be like, they'd have to go back and teach them how to read. But no. They like that students are not coming to them reading at grade level, because that means they can serve them up the 1619 project on a little silver platter. If they actually cared about students reading at grade level, they would be advocating for teaching reading rather than activism. But they're not doing that. They're like, we're going to give you more activism. Here's the 1619. Oh, you can't read? Oh, don't worry. We're going to teach you how you're oppressed. That's what they're doing.
We used a lot of the poetry in the 1619
Hang
project.
on. Valerie says, I live in Missouri. It's an extremely red state. So yeah, good luck to them teaching keeping the crap out of Missouri. Valerie, you should look up the anti-racist math video that I did on this channel a couple months ago, several months ago, 3-4 months ago, because the anti-racist math teacher training manual that I read 80 pages of on this channel came from a high school in Missouri. Congratulations. It came from St. Louis. It came from a high school in St. Louis. So if you think they're not teaching this crap in Missouri, no. They're teaching anti-racist math in Missouri, and I know because I read the anti-racist math teacher training manual that teachers in Missouri are being taught. It's absolutely in Missouri. It's everywhere. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. If you think this is not happening in your state, you're wrong. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. I'm sorry. It is what it is. This is where we're at.
With the texts, we used a lot of the images, the photos as well, and paired it with excerpts from some of the text. I do wish there were some leveled versions of the text for my students. Having the
Why don't you just
podcast
teach them how to
really helped
read
as well. So when we read The Idea of America by Nikole Hannah-Jones, we listened to the podcast as well for different types of learners. But I think also
different types of learners. Holy shit.
out there that you can use.
Did you just hear what she said? We're using podcasts for different types of learners. What they mean is for people who can't read, students who can't read, students who never learned how to read. There are different types of learners. We're just going to use the 1619 podcast. If you can't read, that's okay. That's okay. Here, we're going to do a podcast. If you can't read, we're not going to teach you how to read. We're going to use podcasts. You guys see what they're doing? They're justifying not teaching students how to read. This is a high school teacher justifying not teaching students how to read. We've got a podcast. It's okay. We can listen to a podcast. They're not teaching them to read. Why do you think they might not being taught to read? Why do you think that a high school teacher thinks it's acceptable to not teach students how to read? Okay, moving on. Let's keep going. 10 minutes left.
As partner texts with the 1619 project to help your students access this content. So I mentioned earlier, teaching hard history from Learning for Justice is incredibly useful. Excerpts from The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander is incredibly useful as well. But what I really want to encourage you is just because the texts are more challenging doesn't mean the students can't access the concepts. And students at any level.
Look at the nodding.
Marissa did this with her students at the middle school level. My students at the high school level, who are reading probably a little bit below a middle school level, we're also able to access it and have really high level discussions about these concepts, regardless of their reading level.
I can add in a little bit. I would agree with everything Rebecca said. Great ideas. Certainly in DC, we have a lot of schools where there are struggling readers. And I would say one of the big things I've heard from our high school teachers in particular is that the podcasts have really resonated with our students.
We have a lot of, listen to what this guy just said. We have a lot of schools in which students are struggling to read. And so instead of teaching them to read, we're just going to teach them to listen to podcasts. That is literally what this DC school guy just said. They're perfectly fine with students not learning how to read. And for anyone watching on Odyssey right now, for the people who are like calling me a Jew in the chat and saying, "Oh my God, you're showing Nikole Hannah-Jones unsubbed." Fuck you, dude. That is the whole point of this thing. I'm sorry. This is specifically for the people on Odyssey who are causing a problem in the chat. It's not for people on YouTube. You guys are fine. You guys are behaving. People on Odyssey are getting a little out of control. I've already blocked a couple of them. All right. Why are teachers okay with students not learning how to read? I was reading above grade level when I was in like 2nd grade. Why are students okay with people not knowing how to read in their class? Oh, it's okay. We're just going to give them a podcast. I'm sorry. I know I'm hitting this point home, but my God.
Beyond that, just elaborating a little bit on the instructional moves that teachers can use. We do a lot of close reading of complex texts in DC. And so that might involve the close reading several times of an article and then having an opportunity to discuss it. So starting with a shared read by the teacher and then having students.
Oh, the teacher's reading to them. Okay. Okay. That makes it all okay. The teacher's going to read it to them. It's fine.
Seminar or Socratic seminar have been useful tools to break down
wow.
the ideas in the text. And then one other, there was one question that came up about, could you use this with elementary students? We are looking at doing that going forward into next year. And we've been looking at things by Sam Weinberg, who's written this article called Tampering with History, which is about how you might modify primary source documents or other texts in certain ways and in thoughtful ways to try to make them accessible. So I'll drop a link in the chat.
Wait. He just said they're going to modify primary source documents. Did you guys catch that? This guy was like, we're going to modify primary source documents to make it easier for students who don't know how. I'm sorry, what? Hang on, let's rewind. I know we only have 5 minutes left, guys, but we need to rewind this. I'm sorry, what the hell was that?
It's like Paideia Seminar or Socratic Seminar have been useful tools to break down the complexity of the ideas in the text. And then one other, there was one question that came up about, could you use this with elementary students? We are looking at doing that going forward into next year. And we've been looking at things by Sam Weinberg. He's written this article called Tampering with History, which is about how you might modify primary source documents or other texts in certain ways and in thoughtful ways to try to make them accessible. So I'll drop a link in the chat for that article if you want to check that out.
Holy shit.
And I think our final question tonight will go.
That is the most insane thing I have ever heard. They're talking about modifying primary source documents. Wow. M169 says if they don't know how to read, that it's less likely students will push back. That's exactly right. Not a single one of these teachers has expressed any concern about the fact that students are not reading at grade level. Grade level's not that hard. I'm sorry. Again, I was reading above grade level in like the 1st or 2nd grade. I'm not that smart. I'm not. I'm sorry. I just read a lot as a kid. It is not hard to read at grade level. Something like 30% of students, I want to say it's like 37% of students, according to the National Report Card, are reading at grade level right now. It is not that hard to read at grade level. I'm sorry. And instead of saying, you know what, this is a problem, kids can't read, they're saying, that's okay. We'll just do podcasts and we'll modify primary source documents to make it okay for the kids who don't know how to read. Oh my ever loving God. If this does not outrage you, I don't know what will. If you have children, please read to your children. Please read. Please get them books, not anti-racist nonsense books. Get them like books where there's stories and things. I like Mrs. Pigglewiggle. Did anyone read Mrs. Pigglewiggle when they were in grade school? Mrs. Pigglewiggle was the best. Mrs. Piggle was the best. I had the R.L. Stein books that I really liked. They were like horror books. Have your kids reading, man. Not anti-racist nonsense. Just have them reading anything. Whatever is interesting to them. Use stories. Have them reading fiction books that have nothing to do with nonsense reality. Yeah, Roald Dahl. Yeah. Absolutely. Georgina Rivaloso Nunez says, we couldn't make it more like 1984 if we wanted. Dude, Mrs. Piggle was a jam. There was one Mrs. Piggle where it was like a treasure hunt. That was my Choose Your Own Adventure? Yes. Choose Your Own Adventure books? Awesome. So many books that these kids can read. Man. What the hell?
To Jay. I know other folks in the chat have been asking about, how do you reach non-Black students, particularly white students who might be in a cycle of generational poverty? How do they feel about this curriculum? So if you could address how you have approached this and how your students have responded.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. When we set out to develop the emancipation curriculum, we definitely had that in mind. Our superintendent, Dr. Kreiner Cash, was very adamant about that as well. And we do that through likenesses. Our students need to be able to see themselves in their text, in their schools, in their teachers. And they can see themselves in their teachers or other students when we find things that we have in common, similar struggles, similar loves, similar likenesses, similar passions. And that takes conversating and using things like restorative practices and circling up and talking and establishing dialogues. When we work with white students, primarily, who say, I want to support this curriculum, but I'm Caucasian, so I will never know what it feels like. I will never fully understand.
This guy is so full of shit. I'm sorry.
So we started a program using the 7 archetypes of allyism. And I think this is a great idea for people looking for more buy-in from Caucasian teachers or giving white students something to buy in. So we look at being a sponsor ally, a champion ally, an amplifier ally, an advocate, a scholar, an upstander, or a confidant. And that offers 7 ins for our students to become allies. And it's been an amazing process so far. We've actually spread this, it's the work of Karen Gatlin, I believe her name is, and it's slowly growing, and I'm using it in organizations in Buffalo as well.
Why?
But I think it's time.
What the fuck work are you doing in organizations, dude?
Caucasian people in America, that there's more than one way to become an ally and to support this work.
Welcome back, David.
You don't have to go out there with a microphone. Being a confidant, you don't need that recognition.
This guy is like the worst white savior on the panel. This guy right here.
We have a lot of students doing quiet work, a lot of students doing louder work, and there are Caucasian students. And we have built in struggles and linked to books in the curriculum that show the linkage between people and struggles over time, so that we know that we do have certain things in common in our country. So we're doing a lot of work in that area right now, and we continue, and it is a challenge. So we continue to research in that area, and we hope that we can keep this going, and we know we're doing it the right way. So we're seeing great results so far with that approach.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the panelists tonight. I want to thank the Pulitzer Center, and I want to thank my employer, the New York Times, for taking on this project and giving us the resources. When I started researching my essay, I turned to many sources, but I definitely looked at the Southern Poverty Law Center, and immediately learned that 60% of teachers out there didn't think that their textbooks were cutting it, and most of the most popular textbooks were getting failing grades. So here we are trying to figure it out, and you guys are doing a great job. And
3 hours
thank
and
you very
18
much.
minutes,
I guess
guys.
I'll have Fareed
All right, guys, I guess that's all we have for today. They're doing some wrap up stuff. I'm sure Fareed is going to do a nice pitch for why, I don't know, whatever the hell he cares about. I don't really know. I guess. But guys, I just want to remind you that I do happy hour at 3 p.m. on Fridays. I'm a little buzzed, so I'm going to go hang out with my husband, maybe watch a movie, maybe drink some more. Maybe, I don't know. It's Friday. Who knows what might happen? But guys, thank you for joining me for happy hour. I just want to remind you that through the weekend, I do have a special in my locals community where if you have been thinking about becoming a supporter in my locals, now's the time. Because if you use the promo code Friday or Black Friday, anytime between now and Sunday, you will get a 1-month free subscription to my locals. Now you can join my locals for free, kb.locals.com. But if you want to support the work I'm doing and get some extra exclusive locals perks, including 2 Zoom calls with me every single week, including book club, including craft and bitch, including be able to comment on locals posts and unlocking all the features of locals, you're going to want to become a supporter. After your free month, it's $5 a month, which is less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks, let's be honest. You can also do it for $50 a year. You can also make a one-time gift, but I recommend the monthly option with the free month using the promo code Friday. Again, you get that through, you can use the promo code through Sunday as a special Black Friday deal. I'm slurring my words, so it's time for me to get the F off the internet. But please mouth the like button on the way out the door. Please make sure you are subscribed on whatever platform you're watching on. And guys, I will see you. Maybe I'll do some content over the weekend. I'm definitely going to do Effed Up News on Sunday. Effed Up News, 5 p.m. on Sunday. We're going to talk about what's gone on through the week. But guys, I will see you then. Maybe some content tomorrow. We'll see. We'll see if I'm feeling saucy. All right, guys. Have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you soon. Thanks for spending some time with me today.